Good evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and call the City Council meeting for April 7th, 2008 to order. And as always, first thing on our agenda is roll call and determination of quorum. Jackie, could you please take the roll?
LaCroix. Johnson.
Here.
Hadcock. Hurlbut. Krepke.
Here. Here.
Weifenbach.
Here.
Olson. Kroger. Quaker.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. And as always, next thing on our agenda is the invocation. If you could please all stand. George Nanny from the Wesleyan Native American Ministries will be giving our invocation, and please remain standing for a Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's pray. Father, as we come to you this evening, we thank you for the beautiful moisture that you are sending our way again tonight that we need, and we pray that there would be very few, if no accidents because of this. And Lord, we also pray your wisdom for Mayor Hanks and each of the members of the council as they make decisions on many of the things on the agenda tonight. Lord, we know that each item on this agenda has a name behind it, some individual that has something attached to it, and we pray that you would be with those who get their way and those that don't, that in all together we might have a better community. Lord, we also think of those who are the most vulnerable in our society and the privilege and the responsibility of each of us, and especially the government, of protecting those who are the most vulnerable. We pray your wisdom on this meeting tonight. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. At this point, we are on to the adoption of the agenda. I do have a number of things to add under mayor's items. I have a 103A, which is a report from economic development. A 103B, this is asking for authorization for the mayor to sign a grant application. 103C is just an announcement dealing with the Western South Dakota Hydrology Conference. And 103D, which is the Black Hills Council of Local Government, just an announcement on that. We also do need to add a 2A, which is an award that the city has received, and that is the 2007 Excellence in Operation and Maintenance out at our wastewater treatment plant. Additional, please turn on your light. Let's go to Alderman Karen Olson.
An item about downtown, a downtown project.
Okay, why don't we call that 104E? I'm sorry, 103E. Thank you for catching that. Any additional items to be added to the agenda? Please turn on your light. Any additions? Seeing none, the chair would look for a motion to approve as amended.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second for approval as amended. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Chair would look for a motion to approve the minutes of the March 17th, 2008 City Council meeting.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of the minutes. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We're on to awards and recognitions. Item number 1 is acknowledge the appointment of Robert Ellis as a Public Works Director at a grade 27 step F, and to administer the loyalty oath and offer certification of appointment. Before we do that, we do need a motion from the council.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second for approval of the appointment of Robert Ellis. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? One last time. Anyone want to say anything before we swear him in? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion passes unanimously. Congratulations. Well, it's going to be a big night for you because you also get to receive a very nice award from the State Department of Environment and Natural Resources. Basically, what it states is congratulations. The City of Rapid City has been awarded the 2007 Excellent in Operation and Maintenance Award for its wastewater treatment plant. This award is given to municipalities recognizing the outstanding wastewater system operations and compliance with its surface water discharge permit. You will be receiving this award during the during the 2008 South Dakota Water and Wastewater Association meeting on March 11th and 12th in Cedar Shores, Oklahoma, South Dakota. And if you would just pass along our thanks and our congratulations to Dave Van Cleve, and you get to accept the award right out of the chute, so that's a pretty good deal. Very good. And let's see, is Lynn here? Come on up, Lynn. I think you also, and where's Laurie at? Come on up, Laurie. I think you have an award that you wanted to give. I'm going to turn the mic over to you.
Thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity that we have tonight to extend this award to the City of Rapid City, our partner in the project. And I'm going to turn it over to Tim Forrester, who is in charge of that project, to present the award.
Thank you. Last summer we had a project with the city. We were in the middle of construction on 4 downtown alleys. You go in, you mill out a couple inches of the old asphalt, do a few repairs and pave them back. And one of them was Art Alley, which is the alley behind the Hotel Alex Johnson between 6th and 7th Streets. And I believe the city and Larry were approached by the Downtown Association to do something a little nicer than just plain black asphalt paving. And they approached us, and we came up with a plan to stamp the asphalt in a cobblestone pattern and then give it a colored texture so it looked kind of like a brick pattern. And this was acceptable to the city, Hills Materials, and the downtown folks. And I think there was some private money raised. We even helped out a little bit, and good cooperation between the Downtown Association, the city, and Hills. We paved Art Alley back in August on about a 114-degree day, got it stamped. 2 or 3 days later, we were done painting it and opened it up about a day later. And it's just kind of a unique little area. And we submitted that project to the National Asphalt Paving Association in December for a non-typical construction award. And in January in Arizona, we won the only non-typical construction award that NAPA gave out to 1,200 paving companies nationwide. And tonight we're here to give the city and Larry Chilstrom their award as the owner. And it's basically, to me, it's the fruit of cooperation between the owners, the contractor, and the general public. And it's a very nice honor to give to the city. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Now is the time for the general public comment period. This is the time for members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the council on any issue not on the agenda. Action will not be taken at tonight's meeting on any issue not on the agenda except by placement on the agenda by the unanimous vote of the council members present. We do have a speaker request form for this period from a Craig Sheets. And Mr. Sheets, if you could just identify yourself and just a reminder for everybody during this period, we do turn the lights on, and you will have 3 minutes for your presentation.
This one?
Doesn't matter. It'll pick you up either direction there, Mr.
Great.
Sheets.
My name is Craig Sheets. I came all the way from Orange County, California. Been documenting a whole bunch of stuff with federal judges and the FBI. You could see I've left some documentation with all of you. Spoke with Martin Luna He's the sheriff coroner in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I'm going to talk a little bit about volatile cleaning. You know, every 14 years, Kings Above grant us with some good soil. And the government seems to want to spray the second, which would be sodium nitrate. That's what crop dusters put on the soil. And it eliminates all the minerals out of the soil, so the vegetables and all the produce don't pick any of the minerals up. They kill the minerals in the soil every time. As well, they're now dumping it in the water supply. I don't know if any of you have noticed, but you know, I used to drink water and my thirst was done. Now I drink water and I'm thirsty all the time. It doesn't quench my thirst. So they're putting that in. I'm going to share a little symptoms with you from the sodium nitrate. They're also spraying it on the meat. If you go into the grocery store, start looking at your meat, you'll see some that's red in the middle, and it'll have some brown tips around it. That's the sodium nitrate taking over. It'll cause low energy levels, depression leading to altered behavior, anger, hunger after meals, loss of sleep, sleep sweats, diarrhea, constipation, itchy skin, heavy eyes, and once again, it'll deplete all the calcium in your bones. Sad but true, Martin and I had a lengthy discussion on those chemicals that you're looking at. I'm afraid I'm going to have to bring it up. I'm also working with 3 federal judges in California. Going to go back and speak with them before I go public on it, but it seems to be what school buses are hauling. So we'll keep that to a minimum tonight. And I appreciate you letting me speak, and have a great night. Can I get those back from you?
Sure. Thank you. Mr. Sheets, we'll pass them down to the end if you want to pick them up down at the end. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sheets. We also have a speaker request form from Janet Smith. There again, Janet, we know who you are, but if you could identify yourself for the record, please.
Thank you. My name is Janet Smith, and I live over on 240 St. Francis. I see that we originally had an $8 million overrun in building the Civic Center addition, and now you've got another $29,000 that you're going to add on to it. And now they want $750,000 for parking that they should have addressed in the first place because they haven't had enough parking since they built the thing. But in the interesting part was, reported in the paper, it says that you need $750,000 for the parking and another $750,000 for ADA improvements. But since we're going for $3 million, he says, why not go for $5 million? Because the interest rate is so low. I'm not sure who's running the figures, but I don't have the deepest pockets in the world, and I don't think the rest of the taxpayers do. If we only needed $3 million, let's go for $3 million. Why take it to 5 just because, well, the interest rate is so low? That doesn't make any sense. We don't have enough money to fix the freaking dam on Canyon Lake. And we want to put an extra $2 million out just in case we might need it for the Civic Center that we've already put $8 million extra on? I don't think this is a very sensible thing. We need to use only the money we have to finish the projects we've started. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Seeing no further speaker request forms, and if you do have any issues that you'd like to speak, we do have speaker request forms over here next to the media table. I failed to announce at the beginning of the meeting, and they look like this. If you could please fill that out with your name and also the number of the item you wish to speak to. That way we can keep track of it and make sure we don't overlook you. Thank you, everyone. At this time, we move on to the non-public hearing items. This is items 1 through 106, and the chair would look for a motion to open the public comment period.
So moved. Second.
Very good. Motion on the floor is to open the public comment on items 1 through 83 is the motion on the floor, 1 through 83. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We are in the public comment period. We do have a speaker request form on item 42. And let's see here. Melanie, you're going to have to help me with your last name. Satchel. Very good. Item number 42. If you could identify yourself. Do you need help as far as plugging anything in there?
I'm a school mine student, so hopefully I won't need any help, but we never know here. I might need some help.
Okay,
Do we have a specialist in the house?
Here he comes. Don't feel bad, he helps us all the time.
While we're waiting, my name is Melanie Satchel. I'm the current Student Association President at School of Mines, and I'm here to talk with you about improving the bike path connection from Steel Avenue to the School of Mines, and as soon as we get things rolling here. Thank you.
Yeah. Just a reminder, once you get started here, we allow 3 minutes for this, so.
Thank you.
Okay. There we go.
Thank you. I'm going to keep this brief because I do believe that most of what I've said has already been said before by many others. So I just want to remind you that School of Mines has a total student population of 2,070 students. 600 are in the dorms and about 1,470 commuter students. And one of our biggest concerns with this project is to improve safety for students in traveling from home onto campus. We have various faculty, staff, administration, and other visitors that would be using the path in order to commute to campus for various reasons. So our greatest concern there is student safety. Our other big one is environmental sustainability. As the campus looks more and more on our environmental impacts, we look at becoming more green, and so this is just another way we can do that. Students become rooted in the community by being able to use the bike path to get to various venues such as the ice skating rink, different areas, the parks and stuff like that, and along with the Dakota Roots thing, I think it's very appropriate. We have several different groups on campus that use these trails. The cycling club, which is about 35 students, our cross-country students also run on the path. And as my husband informs me, the ROTC department students wake up at 5:30 every morning and run on the bike path as well. One of the unique things that we look to is creating community, being able to become more implemented into the community, the university being more attached with that, and we really look at creating more relationships, and I think this is a really great introduction to that. And then also economic impact. Our economic impact statement was just released earlier this year, and a low number of about $18 million from students is impacting the economy in Rapid City, and I think that this improvement would help that along. I don't know how to go next.
You actually go to your laptop. Do everything on your laptop, and away
thanks.
you go. There we go.
These are just pictures that show you some of the things that are wrong. We just want to make sure that the safety with that intersection is improved. As you can see, there is absolutely no ramp on to the right side, and so we want to make those improvements, put in a signal to get those across. The bike path would help with the safety crossing the railroad tracks. And then the picture in the bottom right-hand screen just kind of shows you what type of condition the concrete is in that area, and then also just its appeal to the rest of the community. So with that, I will stand by.
Good timing. Very good. Let's see. Typically, let's see. Public comments. Yeah, we're going to wait. If you'd like to pull the item, then we can ask the questions then. Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. We see no further speaker request forms, so the chair would look for a motion to close the public comment on items 3 through 83. We have a motion and a second to close the public comment period. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Chair would ask, are there any items 3 through 83 that anyone would like to be removed from the consent calendar? I assume, Mr. Hurlbut, you'd want item number 42? Thank you. Additional, Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. Items 57 and 58, please.
57 and 58. Very good. Let's go to Bob Dominic.
Item number 33.
Item 33. Very good. So far, the chair has items 33, 42, 57, and 58. Any others? If not, the chair will look for a motion to approve the consent calendar with the exception of 33, 42, 57, 58.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We are on to item number 33. And let's go to, I believe, let's see here. That will be Alderman Lloyd LaCroix. Could you please read that in for us?
Approve the extension of time break and control of access along U.S. Highway 16B Southeast Connector and Cantron Boulevard for Willow Bend area, and move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Discussion on that motion. Discussion on that motion. Let's go to Bob Dominic.
We received some additional information from the Department of Transportation. They have asked that there be no more final platting within that area until the road is actually physically constructed.
Very good. Okay. Questions? Let's go to Alderman Tom Johnson.
I just want to thank the staff for the hard work getting this done. I know the residents out in Elks Country Estates are very interested in maintaining two accesses for safety and also for transportation. It's a good thing, hopefully in conjunction with the tax increment district that we approved out there and the extension of Minnesota Street. We will get that done. Thank you.
Very good. Say, Bob, have we forwarded a copy of that letter we received from the DOT to the council? If not, could you please make sure that that gets done? Very good. Motion on the floor is for approval. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Okay, it is linked. Very good. Just for everyone's information, that letter is linked to the item number 33. That is linked. Okay, motion on the floor is for approval. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. We're on to item number 42 in Legal and Finance, and Alderman Deb Hadcock.
42 is to recommend to the City Council that Project 1 and Project 2 of the Greenway Funding Project proposals be forwarded to the Federal Transportation Administration, and I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Discussion on that motion. Let's see. I'm going to go to Alderman Bob Hurlbut.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my first question would be who could give me just a thumbnail of what we are or are not approving on this item, and then whether that includes Ms. Satchel's request. And then I have a question or two for her.
Okay, I think I can probably answer either that or Jerry Cole. The short answer to your question is, the first part of the project is the improvements down at Founders Park. The second part of that is actually what the speaker was talking about, and that's the extension of the bike path to South Dakota School of Mines. So the answer is yes, it is included in the plan.
Okay, then I probably don't need any questions.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Let's go to Alderman Karen Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to say that Ms. Satchel's part of the conversation was included in the proposal.
Okay, very good. And let's go back to Alderman Bob Hurlbut.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my only question is I'd like to see a diagram of where this is actually going to go. I can see that I know where the intersection is, but I don't know where the rest of the trail goes. If there is such a thing and it could be perhaps emailed to me, that'd be great. Mr. Cole?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The intersection on St. Joe, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I'd just like to see an overhead so I can actually see where it connects.
Okay. It comes across the intersection, but we haven't, the city engineer and the street engineer has not decided where it's going to cross yet. That's at a later stage. Once we get the projects approved, we will continue on to then develop the entire project to send it off to the Federal Transportation.
Thank you.
Any further? Very good. Motion on the floor is for approval. Any further discussion? Further discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We're on to item number 57, please.
57 is to authorize the staff to proceed with drafting a resolution for financing the third level of the parking ramp utilizing the services of Dougherty and Associates, and I move approval.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and second for approval. Discussion on that motion. Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to have a brief explanation of, looks like we did receive several proposals. We did receive a memo with a number of questions and items of information in the memo. However, I would just ask for a very brief presentation of the 4 proposals. I very much appreciate the fact that we went out for proposal, which isn't something that we have often done on bonding, and I'd just like to have a brief presentation of the proposals. And then I would also like to have the answer to the question of, is the money generated by fines, is that revenue being depended upon to pay the bonding costs?
Okay, we're going to go to Mr. Preston, but I think I can answer your question. Fines that are collected, either parking tickets, go into the parking lot and area fund. It does not specifically go to paying off the bonds, but it does go into the fund, which will help pay those funds off. So indirectly, the answer is yes. They will be going into a fund that will help pay the bonds off as the proposal. With that, Mr. Preston, if you could, I believe we also have a link, I believe. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. You are correct. When we're figuring the revenue for all these bonds, we do figure all sources of revenue to include any penalties or fees for not paying your parking ticket on time, or for fines essentially for over parking in an area. To get to the first part of Mr. Quaker's question, Pauline and I did review the 5 proposals that were submitted. We also visited with J.J. Lind, who's Associate Director with the State of South Dakota's Health and Educational Facilities Authority. He was referred to us through the South Dakota Municipal League. They do a lot of bonding there. He did not give us a recommendation on who to go with, but essentially he said flat, do what we felt that we were most comfortable with. He thought Pam Lang's proposal had some merit, that the debt service supplied by each underwriter should not have a bearing on our decision, essentially because those rates do vary from one day to the next. Pauline and I also visited with the 5 individuals that had submitted the proposals. We asked some standard questions and then some questions about clarification of what they have submitted. Our recommendation was to go with Doherty and Company. Primarily, Mr. Woodson has experience through the financing for parking ramps, which are harder to sell than general obligation or sales tax bonds. He did do the financing for the first series in 2003 for the parking ramp. He has years of experience selling municipal bonds and has obtained favorable rates, i.e. when we did refunding here a couple months ago, he did forward the rates that he received, and they're very comparable to other sales that are on the same day, and that is attached. He does share a wealth of knowledge, which is really important to myself and Ms. Sumption. And also when we're comparing the underwriting fees, the cost of issuance is less because they do the POS, or preliminary offering statement, and the offering statement in-house, which saves some money. We did take a close look at Northland Security. Again, the finances overall were more favorable with excuse me, Doherty and Company. We are figuring we're going to have to sell the bonds as non-bank qualified because we anticipate exceeding the $10 million bonding authority this year. And our bottom line for both the Civic Center project and the third level parking, we recommend Doherty and Company because we feel that they will be the most in the best interest of the city of Rapid City. Is there a follow-up question?
Let's see, Alderman Quaker, you still have the floor, sir.
So in terms of costs, the Doherty and Company represents the best deal for the city.
Mr. Preston.
The answer would be yes.
Okay, very good. Alderman Quaker.
Thank you. I'd just like to thank the city finance officer for the presentation, and also note that while in the past there have been a number of times where we have not gone out for bid or RFP on bonding. I think that this represents a good move for the city, and it's especially important as we consider much larger bonding projects later this year. I do have one concern, however, and that is the concept of using fine money from fines to pay the bills. I think that that's troublesome public policy to build a parking ramp and then to hope for violations in order to pay the bills. I don't think that that's a good way to do business. It's precisely for that reason that most cities do not directly fund their police departments with with money generated from speeding tickets, and in much the same way, I don't think that we should be funding parking ramps this way either. With that being said, I realize that there are a number of other funding sources, so that tempers the concern, but I do think going forward we should find a way to try to avoid parking fines as a method of financing new parking ramps. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Quaker. We also have a light on from Alderman Tom Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. At a recent trip to Washington, D.C., there was a number of discussion about the bonding rates. Do we have any indication of what bonding rate that we can expect?
Mr. Preston.
Thank you, Mayor. At the time we got the proposals in, the bonding rates on the short term, which would be the first few years, would be in a neighborhood of 2.3%. And these, as you know, could change significantly over 60 days. And the long range, I believe, is 5 to 5.7, and that would be at the end of the 20-year rates.
Mr. Preston, I believe you have this information. When we went out and refinanced our bonds here about 2 months ago, do you remember what the rate is? 3.11.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
No, I did not remember what the average rate was.
Very
but
good.
obviously you did.
The
Thank you.
overall rate the last time we went out to refinance the bonds was 3.11. Alderman Johnson, sir, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. It sounds like at least the bonding rates will be better than what we heard in D.C. I did want to state that about 2 years ago we did investigate the possibility of using local bankers to do a bonding, and we determined that that was not cost effective because those bonds would then be taxable, so the rates would actually be a couple % higher. So we did that work. Don't need to redo that again. And the question, I think, from the audience earlier about this bonding, we will actually see this again. This just gives authorization to proceed. We can still talk about how much we bond, and the final documents will actually come back in front of the council again, just so the audience does know that. Thank you.
Very good comments. Thank you, Alderman Johnson. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? The motion on the floor is for approval. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. We are on to item number 58, please.
58 is to authorize the staff to proceed with drafting a resolution for financing the Civic Center projects utilizing the services of Dougherty and Associates, and I move approval.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Discussion on that motion. Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know we have a parking task force in place somewhere, and I'm hoping that maybe we could get an update sometime on that. Because I'm assuming that going forward that there may be some possibilities that there may be some increases in fees to help finance this.
This one is for the Civic Center, so I think this is a little bit out of the realm of the parking task force. That's dealing with
doesn't
the
have
downtown.
anything to do with the parking. Okay.
No.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Any further discussion? The motion on the floor is for approval. Let's go to Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. In trying to understand this, the attached document is relating to the parking facility downtown. I'm just trying to understand. The application of the attached memo to Civic Center projects. Somebody can just explain this to me.
Yep. Let's go to Mr. Preston. I think we're looking at the attachment, and I believe it's, let me look here real quick. I believe it's the last line on that same document that deals with the Civic Center. Mr. Preston.
Thank you, Mayor. That is correct. We also recommend that we bond up to $5 million for the Civic Center project utilizing the services of Dougherty and Company. Again, when we interviewed the five, we asked them about what their rates would be if we would go with a bond with the Civic Center. At the time, we were working with the $3 million, but I understood since that time we could go to $5 million. That's why we placed the $5 million in there. And we did talk to a couple of the underwriters at that time to see what their fees would be for that. And as Dougherty and Company did say, if it was $3 million, it would be $9 per thousand. If it was over $4 million, it would be $8 per thousand. So
okay.
That information is on the second page of that document.
Alderman Quaker, you still have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. And these funds will be used how?
Mr. Preston, if not, I think, is Brian here? Would you like a quick update as far as how these funds would be used, Alderman Quaker? Okay. I believe that the council should have received, I'm not sure, Brian, did you distribute that sheet that you provided my office to the council?
No, I provided 10 copies to your office.
I think that was distributed. If you want to put that up on the screen, you can. Do you have a copy of that?
Mine has writing all over it.
Okay.
Apologies.
Go ahead.
If we're able to bond for $3 million, and from the Civic Center Board's point of view, it's dependent upon the financing that's available, the financing rates that's available. The first $850,000, we'd like to bond for 515 stall parking lot addition, along with our Fifth Street parking lot. The next $925,000, we'd like to bond for ADA corrections and ADA upgrades to the theater. This would include making the theater bathrooms ADA compliant. We'd have ADA seating on the floor that would bring us up to code for the number of seats that are required inside of the facility. It would give us ADA ramping within the theater lobby itself. It would allow a passenger elevator inside of the theater to take us from the first floor to the second floor. It would provide ADA seating in the balcony on the second floor. It would, for the first time, give us restrooms on the second floor of the theater to be utilized by the patrons on the second floor. The next $775,000 would be for roof replacements throughout the facility and the complex. We have several hundred thousands of dollars dedicated this year to try to start replacing the roofs. The majority of the facility is 31 years old. Some of the roofs are 31 years old. Some of the roofs have been replaced as recently as 4 and 5 years ago. We're on a schedule right now to replace those roofs that have never been replaced. We'd like to start replacing the roofs that are out of warranty and are more than 15 years old. The next $450,000, we'd like to do HVAC upgrades throughout the facility. The vast majority of our facility, again, is 31 years old, and of course then the vast majority of our HVAC, heating, ventilating, air conditioning is 31 years old. We'd like to spend those monies to upgrade that and bring it up to par. If we're able to bond for $5 million, if we can afford it with the financing, we'd like to bring in an additional $2 million to add 485 stalls north of the arena, north of the existing arena. That would give us a total of approximately 1,000 new parking stalls that would be available to our patrons regardless of which part of the facility they'd use. Now, the difference from the $3 million to the $5 million is quite dependent on what the financing comes in at, what rate does it come in at. If we're able to afford it, we'd like to be able to add the full 1,000 stalls to our parking lots. And if we're not, then we're going to have to stay with just the 515. One thing we don't want to do, we want to keep in the ADA, we want to keep in the roof replacements and the HVAC. Those are things that the facility right now really needs to have. And again, if we're able to go to from the $3 million to the $5 million, we'd like to add the additional 485 stalls north of the arena.
Very good. Just for clarification, I think it's very important that people realize that we're not talking about additional sales tax dollars. This is going to actually be paid back through revenue generated by the Civic Center. Okay, very good.
That is correct. The monies are all paid by us.
Okay. I see a number of lights up. Please keep in mind the motion is dealing strictly with the bonding, and that's what we're gonna hold the discussion to. Please keep in mind the discussion as far as all these different issues will come back in front of us, and we'll have ample opportunity to discuss each individual part of this. The motion on the floor is to actually just authorize the Finance Office to go out and draft a resolution to bring it back and have us take a look at it. So I'm going to hold that fairly close, so please make sure your comments are strictly to the motion dealing with the adoption, or basically directing the staff for resolution. And I will remind everybody, I've been giving a lot of latitude in past meetings. We won't be doing that tonight. So please keep your comments to the motion on the floor. Alderman Lloyd LaCroix.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd That ruined my shot. I got some questions. I guess I'll get with Brian on the parking lots later. My concern's with the parking lot, so.
Very good.
I'll get with them.
Thank you. Alderman Deb Hadcock.
I'd just like to give a kudos to Brian Molesky and the Civic Center Board for working through these numbers. I think they've done a good job on this to address the issues of the council. With the parking, the ADA, and the Civic Center, and with the mayor's help, I think they've come a long ways in the last year to address what we needed. And again, I appreciate the Civic Center Board and Brian working through these issues to find some solution in what we can do to help the Civic Center with these particular issues that we have. Anyway, thank you, Brian, and the board.
Very good. Let's go to Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. Because this involves drafting a resolution that will come back for further review, that is something I can support, but I would like the opportunity at the next meeting to broaden the discussion to allow for some questions relating to the parking and ADA improvements and the rest of the items on the list.
Okay. I think it'd be appropriate. I think Brian will probably be coming back with a PowerPoint going through all these different issues. At least I would assume he'll be doing that. Very good. Let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question would probably go to Mr. Preston, and it had to do with this debt service schedule that was attached. Page 11.
I'm sorry, Mayor, what was the question?
The question is, go ahead, Ron.
I want to ask a question, and I'm just wanting to make sure you could have the same page that I did on the debt service schedule. Someone had talked about interest rates, and I pulled this up, and it looks like the average coupon on this bond would be about 3.122% over a period of 4 years. Is that correct?
Mr. Preston?
I would say that would be pretty close based on the comments that the mayor had made earlier. The only thing I would caution you about this is we don't know for sure what the debt service will be until the bonds are actually sold that day. And you certainly, I know you can understand that with the national economy the way it is.
I just wanted to give the audience kind of an idea of what we were looking at on the bond. So it's 3.122% is kind of what they're expecting right now. So thank you.
Very good. Further discussion. The motion on the floor is for approval to direct staff to prepare a resolution. We also have a light on from Alderman Tom Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll stay pretty close. I want to thank the council for the decision they made in expanding the Civic Center and not making the Civic Center come up with the funding to actually get the building done. This is the exact discussion we talked about, having the Civic Center find a way to get additional parking and improve that facility to be a premier facility in the entire region. And having made the right decision, the council fully funded that project, and now the Civic Center Board and the Civic Center Management has come forward with a project to fill up those items that needed repaired. Good job.
Thank you. Motion on the floor is for approval. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. That does take us to the end of the consent calendar. We are on to item number 84, and the chair would look for a motion to open the public comment period for items 84 through 106, please. We have a motion and a second to open the public comment period for items 84 through 106. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We are in the public comment period for items 84 through 106. We do have a speaker request form on item number 91 from a Paul Evans, 22345 West Nike Road. Mr. Evans, there again, just a reminder to everybody, typically we allow 3, so if you just keep an eye on the lights here, we'll be in good shape. Mr. Evans, we know who you are, but if you could identify yourself for the record, please.
Well, my name is Paul Evans, and I have a brief statement that I'd like to read to the council. As a representative for McMahon Investments property located in Brookfield Tax Increment District, I respectfully ask that our property be removed from this TIF. My grandfather, J.R. McMahon, was born in Rapid City before South Dakota's ever a state. And my grandmother, Catherine McMahon, moved to Rapid City in 1910 and married my grandfather in 1913. They lived and raised a family in Rapid City. My grandfather started McMahon Feed and Seed with his father in 1896. He was in business all of his life. This property was purchased by my grandfather in 1959 and is part of our ranch. In October 2000, We applied for a rezone and a PDD to the city of Rapid City on this property and the remainder of our land in Section 24. The Planning and Zoning and the Rapid City Council approved my plan. In the future, when it comes time to develop our property, we want to have the ability to use our property in a TIF if at all possible. We don't want to be sitting in second position on the property that we have owned for almost 50 years. I didn't even know that the Brookfield Economic Development TIF existed until March 4th of 2008 when I heard about it on the radio. On March 14th at the TIF committee meeting, Marcia Elkins made the statement that in the past it has just been worked out between the applicant for the project and the property owner. Now that Mr. Muth and I have worked it out and Mr. Muth has notified the city that he wants my property removed, I asked the city council to remove our property from the TIF. I received a letter from Karen Bowman on March 18th, 2008, and it says the taxes on the incremental increases in property values used as payment for the costs associated with Brookfield Tax Increment District were obtained from property owned by applicant. No incremental taxes from increases in property values belonging to McMahon Investments were used in evaluating the payoff for the Brookfield Tax Increment District. In the past 30 days, I have found out that another parcel of our property consisting of 140 acres was included in a TIF for the disk drive extension to Kohl's without our knowledge and consent. In the future, I hope that the TIF committee changes the way things are done. I hope that they make it mandatory that if the TIF applicant notifies landowners who they want to include in their TIF. The landowners may have their own plans for their land. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Evans.
I would like to give a copy of this to your clerk so that.
Yep, very good.
It's
Just
on the record statement.
very good. Thank you. We also have a speaker request form from Jamie Carpenter on items number 91 and 92. Looks like 4580 West Nike Road. There again, Ms. Carpenter, we know who you are, but if you could just please identify yourself for the record.
Yes, I'm Jamie Carpenter, and I own the piece that this whole TIF is being based on. Did you guys receive my letter that I sent today? I again requested that I be not included in this TIF. I do have plans to develop my land, and there are plans that I have to also help with the city development in that area. Being that it's an economic development TIF, it would behoove the city to come in with that piece of property and possibly do a lot more for the whole community, and doing some improvements that the city doesn't have money for, but we could include in the TIF. I do not want to be part of this TIF. Again, I'm like Mr. Evans. I found out this land was used for a TIF before, that I just found out at the Legal and Finance Committee. It's tied up till 2014. This would tie it up till 2029. And I need clarification from the council. Is it in fact, after the 9 years or 11 years of a TIF, is the debt forgiven if the taxes do not cover it, or is the developer responsible for it?
I'll tell you what, we don't want to, if you have other questions, we'll address that, but if you want to continue on, I don't want you to burn up all your time.
Okay, that is one large question I have. There was an argument made that that is not the case, that I guess after the time limit, nobody owes anything and the taxpayers still pay for it, I guess. That was what I was given the conclusion, that the developer would not be responsible for it. If they are, then if I develop before 2029 and I am responsible for a TIF that's put on that land, I will be working and my tax will go to other TIFs that were done 3/4 of a mile away from this land and have no effect on this land, and possibly end up being responsible for my TIF before the other TIFs are paid off. Also, I think the last overlapping TIF ended up in the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court. It just, I don't think is a good idea. If you have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Carpenter, appreciate it. Yep, we also have a speaker request form on item number 91 from Bonnie Redden. There again, Bonnie, we know who you are, but if you could please identify yourself for the record, please.
That's okay, Alan. I know who you are, too. I'm Bonnie Redden. I live in Ward 4. I'm retired, and I have a lot of time on my hands, so I run around and investigate things that interest me. This whole thing about this TIF in this, I think they're calling it Brookside area, Brookfield. I went out there, I took extensive photographs. That's what I am, a photographer. I went out there, I took extensive photographs of things across the road that were put in the most miserable housing conditions I've ever seen in my life. 30% grade on a hill with rocks stuffed into the hill. I about gagged when I walked by there. I thought, my God, if we get an inch rain, that whole hill is going to be down in the middle of the road. Anyway, that whole thing just smacks of the same kind of undesirable area for any kind of developing that we're playing with over at the Cabela's site. It is pathetic. It is a drain field, folks. There is an active flowing creek. There, I didn't even get out and walk around like I did up by the Cabela's place. I don't know how many springs, a lot. You can see the water reflecting in the grass. We need to put a halt to all this developing in a green space that has no need to be developed. People don't seem to realize what has gone on here in the last 15 years. We are so overdeveloped and so badly developed. There is no place to go where you can buy a house that doesn't have some silly little twisty road, or you have creeks that are flowing under things like out at the Cabela's place. We have to settle these things into some kind of grids, which is a whole other talk. These little windy roads that are substandard width, have you any idea how difficult it is for emergency vehicles to get through them? And the whole condition of the land out there is just not suitable for housing. It's very unstable. The water is just like over at the Cabela's place. And one other thing before I get out of here. I noticed they changed the wording in the TIF thing about unusual soil conditions. Whose idea was that? You all have my phone. You all have my email. I would like to know whose idea that was. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Redden. We also have a speaker request form from Janet Smith on items number 91 and 92. There again, Janet, if you just identify yourself, please.
Thank you. My name is Janet Smith. I live over on 240 St. Francis. I have a question about the Brookfield. I see it's come back as a revision. It was originally called Economic Development, and if you have a chance this evening to discuss it up here, would you let us know what they have added to it to actually qualify it as economic development other than that 1 acre parcel? And was there any affordable housing tracts added to that as requested at the last meeting? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. With that, I see no further speaker request forms. Anyone else have any other items they'd like to speak to on items 84 through 106? If not, the chair will look for a motion to close the public comment period. So moved. We have a motion and a second. Discussion on that motion. Discussion on that motion. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We are on to item number 84, and Deb, if you could read that in, please.
84 is the first reading of ordinance number 5373, repealing chapter 1526 of the Rapid City Municipal Code in its entirety and adopting a new chapter 1526 of the Rapid City Municipal Code entitled Mechanic Code, and I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. And if you allow me to, I'd like to just make a general statement regarding 84 and 85 and just simply ask, as I do when we have a number of these types of amendments come through, that the people that are the most affected by these changes, that there would have been a public hearing process in terms of them being directly notified of this change so that there's not a surprise later on.
We'll go to Bob Dominic. I think he can probably address that and give us an update. Mr.
Yes.
Dominic.
Yes, there were the hearings for the people that were involved, and they all went along with this.
Okay.
The builders, the mechanical builders.
Okay. Alderman Quaker, you still have the floor, sir? Yep, very good. Motion on the floor is for approval of item number 84. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 85, please.
85 is the first reading of ordinance number 5374, repealing chapter 15.22 of the Rapid City Municipal Code in its entirety and adopting a new chapter 15.22 of the Rapid City Municipal Code entitled International Fuel Gas Code, and I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 86, please.
86 is the first reading of ordinance number 5376 to require notification of the police department prior to moving a building by adding section 5.44070 to the chapter 5.44 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, and I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 87, please.
87 is the second reading of ordinance number 5372, adding antique stores as a conditional use in the neighborhood commercial zoning district by amending section 1720030 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, and I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Before we go on, just for everyone's clarification, we do have a duplication. Item 88 and 89 are actually the same issue, so we will take action up on 88, and we would expect a tabling motion on 89, because that is a duplicate. With that, Alderman Deb Hadcock, could you please read in 88, please?
Number 88 is to approve interest rate benchmark language for adoption and immediate implementation for all future development agreements, and I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Discussion on that motion. Discussion on that motion. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 89, please.
89 is to approve interest rate, and same as 88, and I move to table.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to table. No discussion on tabling motions. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 90, please.
90 is approve request by City of Rapid City to consider an application for a revised project plan for tax increment district number 54, Rainbow Ridge, located north of Malt Drive and west of Haynes Avenue. I move approval.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Discussion on that motion. Alderman Lloyd LaCroix.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be abstaining from this. I do live in Rainbow Ridge. I
Think
don't
that's a
want
good
to
reason?
have a perception of conflict of interest. I'll be
Okay.
abstaining.
Very good. Let's go to Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I ask a couple of questions, I'd just like to note for the benefit of Alderman LaCroix that this benefits your entire neighborhood, and I do not see a need for you to abstain, and I'm sure that the city attorney would agree. But I would like to ask for just a brief presentation on the effects of this change and the reason for it.
Very good. Let's go to Karen Bowman from Growth Management.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a revision of the tax increment district that's already in place. It was put into place several years ago, 2005. The reallocation is a request by several people. Mainly it came from the City of Rapid City. It is to change $750,000 for a water well and instead use that money for a water reservoir. and the Public Works Department has indicated that this is necessary at this time and place, and they can certainly go into more detail if you wish that. The second part of that is a reallocation of funds for some of the capital costs to go to professional costs. And there's approximately 215,000 of those that go to fund professional costs that are within that tax increment district. And the third is a reallocation of $100,000 from capital costs that come from the Parks and Rec Department, and that is to go for professional service costs and park service and construction administration. The Tax Increment Financing Committee moved approval of all the items with the exception of the Parks and Rec, and that item came after that meeting was called and went through that process. So that went to Planning Commission. Planning Commission did approve that, and I believe the Legal and Finance Committee also approved that reallocation of all the funds.
Okay. Alderman Quake, you still have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. One follow-up, Karen. This does not include developer costs. Costs the developer would normally be required to pay these. This is for city costs only.
Karen?
The $750,000, I believe it was for the developer to do that, but the costs are just being re-established into for the developer. Hang on just a second, if you don't mind, and I'll verify that.
Let's go to Robert Ellis.
I can speak to the request that the Public Works Office made, and that was a reallocation of the $750,000 for the installation of a new well. The Water Advocacy Task Force had met over the course of the past year, and the philosophy has changed, and rather than poking the Madison well in areas around town, we're looking to do an actual elevated reservoir. I think that's a better water management tool. So the request came from Public Works to reallocate that $750,000 for a well and instead do an elevated reservoir. I can say that traditionally that is a cost that is usually something that the Public Works Office or the city would instigate. In this case, there is a TIF there. I believe the developer is upfronting those costs being repaid by the TIF. So,
okay, Alderman Quake, you still have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. My one concern was when I heard you indicate, Karen, that there were the consultant fees and design fees. I just wanted to make sure that those fees are for the publicly needed portions and not for the developer's normal cost.
Karen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Originally, excuse me, originally when the TIF was put together, they put a lump sum, if you will, on the cost for capital costs. They didn't break out the engineering costs and those kinds of things. When the developer was going forward with some of the costs for those capital costs, he actually broke those out, got to finance, and finance committee said, finance department said those are broken out and they need to be paid that way. So that's the reason why the developer's costs are breaking out that $215,000 for those professional costs. It's for engineering costs for some of those projects. The other portion, the $100,000, is from the Parks and Rec. When we discussed this with Jerry Cole, his portion of the Parks and Rec to develop that park out there, the Vicki Powers Park, that's what the money is for. And up front, they need to go out and get a design of that. And so they're in the process of getting a design and those costs for those things, engineering costs for that park. And that's what that $100,000 would be for, to pay those costs.
I'm going to try and restate this question because I think what Alderman Quaker is looking for is the $215,000. Is that for design of the water storage tank?
It is designed, it's several things. There's a booster station there. There was some water mains. It's a accumulation of all those different items that is in the cost for that project.
Okay, I don't want to answer Alderman Quaker. Alderman Quaker, you still have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. I just would like to have assurances that these funds are not going to be used for what is normally deemed developer cost. That's all I'm looking for here.
Karen?
And to be honest, Mr. Quaker, I have not seen the actual costs. They went down to finance, but they were broken out into the different line items that are on the original plan, which was for the booster station. Hang on again. For the booster station, the water main and Bunker Drive, the water main, some grading, the well and park improvements, and those were all broken out. The well obviously was not included in that because they're not doing the well at this point. There is some professional service costs for the reservoir, I believe, but all those were broken out into a certain percentage for professional service costs, the engineering and that kind of thing.
Alderman Quaker, you still have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, and perhaps you can help me with this one, but perhaps what would be appropriate here would be just amendment to this that simply allows the finance office to, to go through the requested reimbursements and just make sure that these aren't developer consultant fees that the city is being asked to pick up. I'm just asking for assurances there, and I don't know if an amendment is necessary or if that's the intent of the motion in the application, but I don't want the city to be inadvertently picking up costs that we're not required to pick up.
Karen?
Thank you. I believe that the costs that they're dealing with are strictly engineering fees. They're not developer costs that I'm aware of anyway. And like I said, I have not seen those invoices, but the TIF committee did go through those one by one and approve that that motion to go forward and pay those costs. So they're normal, typical costs that you would associate with any project as far as engineering fees and those things.
Yeah. Anything else, Alderman Quaker? Now, let's go to Alderman Karen Olson.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Robert really did answer my question, which is that the Water Advocacy Task Force has given a different direction. So I just thought it was important that that task force is operating and giving advice that has global impact for our community.
Yeah, very good. Let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to hold my comments here, but in light of the questions that have arisen, I would like to ask maybe the finance office a question about who certifies the costs when they come in and they say, okay, I paid for this, it was in our TIF and it's a public improvement, and who actually certifies that and how does that process work?
Okay, very good. Just a reminder, if you have cell phones or pagers, please turn those off. And since that was actually one of our staff members, the rule is that if a cell phone goes off, at our next meeting you provide donuts for everyone in the room. So if somebody would just inform Jackie, Jason's looking, it wasn't mine. So, very good. Let's go next to, let's see, you had a question for the finance office as far as certification of the cost. Mr. Preston.
Thank you, Mayor. I understand the question was who actually certifies the cost, and it is Ms. Sumption actually certifies that based on what's in the project plan and against the invoices. So she will not pay anything that's not approved by the project plan.
Okay, let's see. Ron, you still have the floor, sir. Anything else?
No, not at this time. I think I'm not going to belabor this question.
Okay, very good. Let's go to Alderman Tom Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to clarify a few things on the TIF here, at least as I understand. The amendment here does not affect the payback in time frame. It also does not affect the original dollars approved in the tax increment district. It simply moves monies around. It does not affect the interest rates in any way, but it does affect the community in the fact that we're moving forward with a park system in the area that we do not have a park system in. It's a public improvement. And it does affect, in a positive way, our water system and delivery of water, because the fund is going to pay for water, thereby not requiring the city to go in out of the utility funds and pay for that, and giving us another reason to raise water rates. So, in essence, the TIF hasn't changed other than the elements inside. My final remark will be that I believe it's the council's job to determine what is payable through this plan, not the staff's. I wouldn't want to put the burden on the finance officer to say if these are public improvements or developer costs. This is what's in front of us tonight. And I think pretty clearly what I hear is that these are community costs and they should be approved. Again, the real benefactor of this is the community in terms of park improvements and in terms of being able to deliver water without raising water rates. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Motion on the floor is for approval. Alderman Bob Hurlbut.
Thank you, Mayor. In looking at this, number one, I note the staff report recommends approval. And I was under a misunderstanding in terms of whether there was features being built into the package that we're looking at that would accommodate some of the needs of the parties who are against this. And obviously, they're not on board. Oh. Gotcha.
You sounded good, but I think what you're referring to is item 91 and 92, is that correct? Okay, very good. Further discussion on item number 90, and motion on the floor is for approval. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Now we're on to item number 91. Deb, could you please read that in, please?
91 is a request by Spurlick Consulting Incorporated for DOIC LLC to consider an application for creation of a tax increment district located east and west of Haynes Avenue and north and south of Country Road. And I move approval.
We have a second, is that correct? We have a motion and a second for approval. Discussion on that motion. Let's go to Alderman Deb Hadcock.
Actually, I'll save it for the project plan. That way I just talk on one.
Very good.
Thank you.
And Deb, you bring up a very good point. Please keep in mind, we actually have two different issues on our agenda. 91 deals with the creation of the tax increment district itself. So if we could keep the debate as far as creation of the district and really not talk about the components, because the components of the TIF are included in item number 92. So if we can try and keep those separate. With that, let's go to Alderman Malcolm Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In light of the discussion with from Mr. Evans and working with the applicant, I would make a substitute motion to approve the creation of tax increment district number 67 with the removal of Mr. Paul Evans' property.
We have a substitute motion, and that motion is to approve the creation of the tax increment district less the Evans property. Everyone clear on that motion? Okay. Discussion on that motion, please. Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. For the sake of discussion, since we are removing one landowner's property at their request due to their concern, I'd like to, for the sake of discussion, offer a motion to also remove the property owned by Jamie Carpenter, and I'd like a second on that so we can have some discussion.
Second for discussion.
Okay. We have a second substitute motion, and I'm going to make sure I have this motion correct. And that second substitute motion would remove both the Evans property and the Carpenter property. Is that the extent of your motion, Alderman Quaker? Okay, very good. Discussion on that motion. Discussion on that motion. Alderman Malcolm Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand where Sam is going with this, and I didn't ask for the Carpenter property to be removed at this time, simply because that then changes the entire creation of the TIF. Without that Carpenter property in there, which allows it to be an economic development TIF, then I don't think this TIF is worth creating. I understand the concern by the Carpenters that their property is included in that. It is allowable by state statute today, so I think the applicant was coming forward in terms of what's allowable by state statute, just to have a parcel in there that would then give it that designation of economic development TIF. So my recommendation to the council is that we defeat the motion on the floor and then take up the motion just to remove the Evans property at this time.
Very good. Thank you. We also have a light on from Alderman Tom Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to talk in general terms. Whereby the applicant and a property owner agree to remove property, I think that the council should consider that. I think that the council moves somewhat in a dangerous position when you allow individual property owners to just simply opt out of a TIF, because normally tax increment districts are used for regional facilities in terms of drainage improvements, in terms of oversizing of roads, in terms of sewer and water lines, and there are other community costs, park system and things like that. I believe that you somewhat endanger the tax increment district process and actually endanger the ability for the community to actually use this funding mechanism to pay for improvements. So as a general statement, I would encourage the council to get into bidding war on whose property is in a tax increment district. Further, I would say that normally property owners and developers get together and determine where they would like to have improvements in their property, which are community costs, by the way, and work together to determine what is necessary amongst all of those folks. Of course, when you do a tax increment district, the improvement must be made within 5 years. Otherwise, they're not eligible for reimbursement through the TIF. And it also reminded the council that the tax increment district, again, is used in terms of doing oversized costs on streets. If you don't do it in a tax increment district, you do it out of the capital improvements fund. That fund also builds additional roads and repairs our roads. You want to be careful on that issue. In addition to, it also is used to not pull money out of our utility funds in terms of sewer and water. And again, if you can grow the community without raising water and sewer rates, I think that's generally a good thing. And the other thing is that we also have other improvements that are community improvements in terms of city buildings and parks and a number of things that also are out of capital improvement. So at any time you don't use this funding mechanism and you must go to capital improvements or you must go to the water utility fund or the sewer utility fund, I think it makes good sense. So as a general rule, I don't know that you really ought to encourage individual property owners from coming up and say, I want my parcel out and do a bidding war. I would think the council should encourage property owners, if they do have a plan to improve their property, to work together on the front side, if possible, identify the community benefiting projects, which is again oversized roads, oversized water and sewer, get together and make those at that time. So that's in general my discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Bill Okrepke.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I was part of the TIF committee, and I've listened to the arguments from the applicant, and it seemed to make sense to me. But I also was under the impression that everybody that was involved with properties and in the district were okay with it. Right now, we approved, I know the TIF committee approved this property, or the TIF in its entirety. Now one group wants to break away, and another group wants to break away. So I'm not so sure if we're ready to vote on this. I mean, we don't know the numbers. How does this, if we do pull this out, how does the numbers affect the applicant and the TIF? What I'd like to do, and I would like to suggest my colleagues to vote the current motion down and I'd like to make a substitute motion that we continue this for a couple weeks so that we can have the applicant and make sure that the applicant is all on board and everybody that's involved is either happy, and then we can take a look at it. And if we need to, then take it back through the process again, through the TIF committee and the planning commission, and finally back to us again. So that would, I'm open to, I'd like to see what the rest of my colleagues want to do, but I'd like to throw that out for thought.
Very
Thank
good.
you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Deb Hadcock.
Can I ask Jason a question?
Sure, as long as it's related to the motion on the floor.
Jason, isn't this parcel already in a TIF? And can it be taken out of that the first TIF?
Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's my understanding that the parcel owned by the Carpenters is included within another TIF district, and it cannot be removed at this time.
So if it cannot be removed and it's added to this, I think we can address some of the issues on the project plan with the developer. And I don't know if we need to talk about that right now, but I guess that kind of answered our question for some of the people that are wanting to continue this over this parcel.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Bob Hurlbut.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with a lot of the comments that have been made. When I went on the taxpayer junket to New Orleans, one of the seminars I attended there was on tax increment financing. And in my position as a councilman, it's not my job to know the details of the stuff. It's my job to take a big view, big picture view. And in my big picture view, some of the things I learned at that seminar involve getting buy-in from all the parties involved as well as the public, and the benefits of tax increment financing are hard to overstate. I mean, it's something I prefer to try to do when we can, but we also need to try to get buy-in. And so I'm really torn here, because I was under the impression that we could build in a feature to this TIF that would accommodate the other landowners, and obviously they're not in agreement on that. So I'm inclined to agree with Alderman Okrepke. I'd like to have 2 more weeks to take a better look at this. I agree with Alderman Chapman's comment that if this cannot be done as an economic development TIF, then it's probably not worth its while. So I'd like to try to find a way to make it work, and probably have some more time to look at that and see. My final comment is, I guess I'd like to hear as well from my colleagues and perhaps even the mayor, because I know this was a big re-election issue, and I guess I'd like to see what the mayor's thoughts are on this as well. So I'll leave it at that.
Very good. Let's go to Alderman Malcolm Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand some of my colleagues' concern about some of the property owners and maybe continuing this to get the numbers, but by taking the Evans property out of this TIF does nothing at all to the numbers. The numbers were not included when that TIF committee looked at those numbers. So removal of the Evans property does nothing at all to the numbers of this project. And maybe we should have Karen Bowman come up and address the numbers issue. I don't think that the project needs to be continued at this time, but I'd like to hear Karen's comments about the numbers concerning this TIF, with and without the Evans property.
Okay. Glad you said that, because now it fits. Okay. Karen, can you just very quickly give us a recap as far as the base and the effect of removing properties?
Correct. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This particular property and this development for this tax increment district includes a large pieces of property. The pieces of property that are used as incremental tax income to pay off this TIF are for property that is located on the west side of Haynes Avenue. It's about 160 acres on the very west end, and that is owned by the developer. The other pieces of property for Mr. Evans and Mrs. Carpenter are not included as far as the dollar figures in figuring out the payback for this TIF. Their property was included, specifically Mr. Evans' property was included because it was an undeveloped piece of property. And if in the future, in the next 20 years, or in this case the payback was in 11 years, if in that time frame that property would be developed, any incremental value that came off that property would then help to pay that TIF off faster. And that's why that was included in there. Mrs. Carpenter's property was also included in there partly because it was in that area, and the main reason though is because it was the only commercial property that was included in that boundary, and they kept that in there so that it could be an economic development TIF. You take that out, it doesn't make any difference as far as paying back the TIF, but it will create, if you decided to go forward with that tax increment without that piece of property, it would create a non-economic development TIF, and the school taxes would have to be paid back by the citizens of Rapid City. They'd have to re-levy the school levy.
Thank you. Alderman Chapman, you still have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in light of what Karen shared, I don't see a reason to continue this item to try to get our arms around numbers, because numbers don't make a difference by taking the Evans property out. And in light of what she shared in terms of why the TIF committee agreed to put the Carpenter property in this TIF. So in light of that, I would still ask my colleagues to vote down the second substitute motion on the floor, and then really take up discussion on the substitute motion that was previously on the floor.
Okay, thank you. We also have a light on from Alderman Bob Hurlbut.
Thank you, Mayor. 2 things. First of all, Ms. Bowman, can you address the question? I was under the impression there was a feature being built into this that would be an accommodation to, I believe, the Carpenter property that would allow for subsequent development of that property. Can you address that issue?
Or we're going to let you take this is actually part of the next topic, but I think it's important because it talks about whether or not we should include this property. And so, Karen, very quickly, if you could answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Currently, it is not. The project plan that you see before you is the project plan that came before us from the Tax Increment Committee. There are some changes when you get to that point, if it's approved to create this body. When you get to the project plan, we can discuss that, and you can add dollars to that if that's your choice, and rearrange some of those dollars.
Okay, let's see. Alderman Hurlbut, you still have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. And I guess perhaps I'll reserve my comments till we get to the next step here.
Very good, thank you. Any further discussion? The motion on the floor is a second substitute motion, and that is to approve the TID with the removal of the Evans and the Carpenter's property. Everyone clear on that motion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion, I believe, fails, but let's take a roll call just to get it on the record, please.
McCoy.
No.
Johnson.
No.
Adcock.
Apologize, what are we voting?
The motion on the floor is for approval of the TID district with the removal of the Evans and the Carpenter project.
Oh.
Okay.
Thank you.
Robed.
No.
McCrepke.
No.
Chapman.
No.
Weifenbach.
Aye.
Olson.
No.
Kroger.
No.
Quaker.
Motion fails on an 8-2 vote, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you, everyone. We are back to the substitute motion. The substitute motion on the floor is approval of the TID district with the removal of the Evans property. I'll get this right yet. The Evans property. Discussion on that motion, please. Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. I realize that it's all said and done, but I think there was a little bit of confusion on the intent of my previous motion. My previous motion was, I intended it to be an amendment, not a motion for approval, but that, that's all right. I would just like to ask the question regarding overlapping TIF. I mean, there's a number of issues with this TIF, but one of the issues is the fact that this involves an overlap, and that the Carpenter's property is already included in another TIF. Another issue is that the Evans property is now being removed, and it's being stated that it was never calculated into the first set of calculations, which concerns me, that we would be putting 150 acres of property into a TIF without the landowner's knowledge or consent, and then not even calculate the valuation of that property in the overall calculation. I don't understand how that can happen. Here's the bottom line: is that this TIF, as it stands, in order to be called an economic development TIF, requires the inclusion of some economic development property, and there's 1 acre that's going to be included, and it's less than 1 percentage point of all of the acreage in this TIF. And it makes a difference, because if the property is not included, then it affects the levies for everyone in the Rapid City School District, whereas if the property is included, it affects everyone in the state of South Dakota. Now, if I lived in Vermilion or North Sioux City or Sioux Falls, I would not be happy with the idea of Rapid City calling this an economic development TIF, when we all know that it's not truly an economic development TIF. And this is not fair to the taxpayers of our state. And the other side of that is that if that piece of property is not included, that's not fair to the citizens of Rapid City, because overall the TIF has very little benefit to the overall population of Rapid City. It, especially with the box culvert issue and some of the other issues that were brought up, this really benefits a very select group of people and doesn't benefit the community at large. So I'm very concerned about the way this process is occurring, and I guess the question that I would like to ask the Carpenters is, do you plan to use your your property anytime, let's say the next 5 to 10 years, for economic development or general commercial development purposes.
Okay. And just, Ms. Carpenter, just real quickly, because when we start getting dialogue, at this point of the meeting, what we do is when there's a specific question asked, we'll certainly give you every opportunity, but what we don't allow is latitude. So if you could just very quickly just answer the question and not get into other topics.
Yes, and I also wrote you all letters stating what we would do with the economic development TIF, which is take some of the cost of the city improvements needed to be done that the city cannot afford.
Okay. Alderman Quaker, you still have the floor, sir. Anything else? Okay, very good. Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Lloyd LaCroix.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm in support of the motion on the floor for the simple fact I've actually seen that some future land use of the property up in that area, and I think it's in need of the drainage that's in proposal. And I do believe in the future there is going to be zoning for industrial and future commercial in that area. I mean, it's going to grow. I mean, with all that's going on out there. So I'm just in support of the motion and saying that there is going to be more commercial out there. Maybe not right now, in 2 years, 3 years, but within 5 years, I would think there's going to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do want to make a few comments, and then I'll leave it at that. But my first comment would be is I'm not against this TIF in say. I am against the catch-22 that this council's been put into for the simple reason of calling this an economic development TIF on a 1 acre parcel of land that's almost undevelopable in itself. I don't know who, I know we're acting within the state guidelines, and I think there's a process that takes place. I think that, judging from the realms of the TIF, and the guidance that these people have gotten from the city and everybody involved, that they're within the realms of what they're doing. Do I think it's right because of this? Absolutely not. Because of the saying that 1 acre parcel of land is going to create tax revenue that's going to make up for the sales tax revenue that's lost in this district is just insane at best. To say that to equate this to the substance of trying to raise garbage revenues or water revenues, in my mind and in my calculations, it doesn't make sense. Someone's going to pay for this, and the people of Rapid City, the people of South Dakota, are going to pay for this TIF. Okay? Well, that's something that I'm sitting here trying to listen to that, and I just disagree with that. There is a cost to doing these, and the cost difference is obviously a bonding issue that's 3.3%, a TIF issue that's 9%, a city that supposedly doesn't have money to pay for something that we're telling this developer that we have money to pay for. If we have money to pay for this and our city staff thinks that we need these oversizing costs, then we should pay for them. I'm in total agreement with that. But the point of calling it economic development in lieu of shortchanging the state taxpayers, which the city taxpayers are included, I think is out of line. And I'm going to disagree with that fact. But I do agree with the fact that I understand the drainage issues in this area. They're huge. If we don't do something right, it's going to be trouble in the future. In Ward 1 and in South Rapid, we're dealing with these drainage issues that, because we didn't set the infrastructure up front, they're huge. We're talking millions of dollars in drainage issues now. But to put it in a tax incremental finance, to shift the cost that we say to someone else, there's still a cost involved here, whether we do it or not. I would be more apt if the staff or administration came to me and said, Ron, we need to get these box culverts built in this Brookfield subdivision, which, looking at the whole subdivision and everything, I understand and I believe that we do need these to create or not create a problem for the future council people in 10 years or 20 years, but I'd like to see us pay for it, through some sort of whatever we have set aside, and if we don't have the money to pay for it, then we should consider not doing it. That's as simple as that. I can't clarify myself any simpler than that, and I understand that Mr. Muth has done a lot for North Rapid, and I understand for the Carpenters, I had this conversation with you earlier about what he has done by creating the excitement in North Rapid. He has obviously created and Mr. Evans is saying, your property values are probably up there, worth probably more than you could have imagined when your grandpa bought this place. and a lot of it is because of economic development. I would just like somebody from administration, maybe, or staff to tell me that these are the things that we should pay for, and then we should figure out a way to pay for them other than divert the burden to the taxpayers in some other fashion. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Tom Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to speak on a couple of different issues. First of all, I think the city takes a conservative approach when it determines can a TIF be paid back and at what time frame it's paid back. It's a common approach when we do these TIFs that we do not include all of the land assuming that there will be development. We commonly do that. If the land is developed and if there's an increment increase, that's a bonus. The TIF is paid back sooner, there's less interest involved, and the property tax comes back on the property rolls. I think that is a good way to do business. I don't think we ought to bet on people that aren't developing their property to assume that there will be additional development to determine whether the payback will actually be there. A question was asked earlier if the city would be stuck with the cost of the TIF if they were not paid back in the time frame. First of all, I believe there are estimates within the tax increment district. Does not mean they only have a certain time to pay for. We estimate the time frame to be paid back. Secondly, the people that make the investment normally in tax increment districts are the developer. They have the risk, they put the money up, they visit with the banker is paid back through the tax increment district. Therefore, if the TIF is not paid back within the time frame, it's still the deal between the developer and his banker, not the city. So the city is not eligible for that. Thirdly, the state codified law determines whether something is a economic development TIF, not the city of Rapid City. We're going with their explanation of what a economic development TIF is, and this is what they call an economic development TIF, regardless of the size of the commercial property. The thing I would say that all the surrounding property in this area is benefited by development, and the reason why I say this is because every time land is developed and there's new investment in an area in terms of sewer and water, in terms of a road system, it helps the value of the property. In this case, I believe the Carpenter's property's values will go up because you can't sell commercial unless you have people to do business in the commercial place. The more people you have, the greater your land is worth, and the more commercial value, assuming you have some kind of a store, you sell some kind of a business. So I think that goes hand in hand. I could be persuaded to continue this if I heard the Carpenters say, and I might ask this question at some point, they would make their improvement within 5 years, and the improvement would be community cost. If it's a developer cost, I don't think it's worth continuing. If you think you could get your improvement done within 5 years and it could also be included in here, I might say that we should take a look at it. I did hear you say that you had some interest of doing that. And the other thing I'd like to say, the more land you have, the more raw land you have, the more potential for investment and increase in evaluation. The increase in valuation pays back the tax increment district. So anytime you take property out of a tax increment district, I think you have the potential of retiring that district away. Again, our goal is to put the development back on the tax roll so the city and the county and the school district can all gain from the tax. That is our goal. And again, we do take a look at this in a conservative fashion. So, in my opinion, and finally, I will tell you that the question is made, should this be a tax increment district? As a council person, I was elected by people in my ward and people in the city of Rapid City. If somehow some of the tax burden is shifted to Aberdeen, I don't think I'm going to hear it quite as loudly from those folks as I am from the people in my ward. I'm going to tend to represent the people in my ward in this community first. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Bob Hurlbut.
Thank you, Mayor, and I agree with the comments of Alderman Johnson. I think I can agree that it's appropriate to draw the district as the motion currently on the floor would have it. I do still have concerns with the project plan, which will be the next item, and that by that I mean the accommodations that we build into this for the Carpenters. My only other thing is I'd still like to know, staff I think recommends this, and I think council's going that direction. Mayor, would you weigh in on, do you recommend approval of this?
I will tell you that, thank you for the question. It has been my practice to always wait until the decision of the council because I don't think it's appropriate for the mayor to sway the decision of the council. Once any issue is either approved, specifically is approved by the council, I'll take a look at it, and quite honestly, I think that that's when it is required of my position to take a look at whether or not it's appropriate. And I'm not trying to sidestep the issue, but I also am very, very cautious about trying to weigh in. In the 10 months, I've never given advice one way or another on a TIF, and I don't intend to do so tonight. This is a council decision. If the council decides to approve it, then it's my responsibility to take a look at it once it's been approved. But thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Any further discussion? I'm sorry, ma'am. Did you have a question? Did anybody have a question? Okay. Ma'am? Okay, very good. Alderman Johnson will recognize Alderman Tom Johnson.
Mayor, if I'd be allowed to ask a question of the Carpenters. My question would be of the Carpenters, is there intention to make their improvements within the 5-year period which would be eligible for tax increment district repayment, and is that improvement would be considered as a community improvement?
Okay.
If so, I have another remark.
Okay. Ms. Carpenter.
We are working with Fisk Engineering. We were offered by one of the council members $75,000 as an offer. When I told Janelle, she kind of laughed and she said that is about 25% of what we're going to need just for the drainage issues on that property.
Alderman Johnson, you still have the floor, sir.
Mayor, may I ask, hopefully I didn't forget my question. One other question would be, in dealing with the Fisk Engineering, when would you expect your plans to at least have a ballpark figure in knowing what your development is and what are the community costs on that?
Janelle said they wouldn't even be able to start till the end of May on our project.
Okay. Anything else, Alderman Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? The motion on the floor is a substitute motion to approve the TID district with removal of the Evans property. Everyone clear on the motion? Seeing no further lights. Alderman Bill Okrepke.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate the latitude you've given me here. Was there some kind of incentive or some kind of money set aside to support the this project plan?
That'll be coming up next thing on the agenda. Very good. Motion on the floor is for approval of the substitute motion, which is the approval of the TID with removal of the Evans property. Seeing no further lights. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion passes with 2 noes from Alderman Quaker and Alderman Weifenbach. Is that correct? Okay, very good. Thank you, everyone. Now we're on to item number 92.
92 is a request by Spurlick Consulting Incorporated for DOAC LLC to consider an application for a tax increment district project plan located east and west of Haynes Avenue and north and south of Country Road, and I move approval.
We have a motion and a second. Is that correct? I thought I heard a second down there. For approval of the creation of the tax increment project plan. Discussion on that motion. Alderman Malcolm Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to make a motion yet, but just, there seemed to be a lot of conversation during the creation of the TIF district. I'm the council member that Mrs. Carpenter was talking about. I didn't offer her $75,000. I mean, I don't have any money to offer. But in talking to the applicant, we were trying to craft some way that through this project plan of the Brookfield TIF, could there be some monies potentially set aside in the future to help out the improvements on the Carpenter property, and looking at it, there is some room in that TIF to do that, as well as the question that was asked earlier of the Brookfield folks about the affordable housing, which will be a part of this, as well as the I had asked a question, I think, through the TIF committee meetings a year ago, as well as at Legal and Finance. Would the developer be willing to upfront the city costs for that and then being paid back through the TIF? And the developer said yes to all 3 of those things, so that there would be some money set aside in this project plan for the Carpenter's improvement, or to pay for some of those improvements, public improvements, as well as affordable housing, as well as developer upfronting the cost for this. So I'd like to hear the rest of the discussion for the council before I put a substitute motion on the floor.
Very good. Let's go to Alderman Tom Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. On this particular plan, I would actually be interested in a continuance on the plan. I think it's important that we created the district. I think the developers needed to know that we're interested in working. However, I think that we need to give the carpenters some time to get an idea of what kind of public improvement, and I keep saying public improvement, which are city tax dollar costs, that might be necessary in their development. I think that if the tax increment district can afford it, it ought to be included. Again, we shouldn't be rating our capital improvements in our water and sewer fund. We ought to be doing it if the developer is, or the property owner would be interested in upfronting the cost of that and being repaid. So I think some continuation is prudent. Again, we've now created the district, but now I'd like to know what to include in the plan, if there are some additional elements, community costs that are involved in there. So, would you like me to make a motion, Mayor? For discussion purposes, I'm going to make this remark first. We can continue this again, but I'm going to move that we can continue this to the next city council meeting and maybe ask the two folks to get together to determine what kind of additional costs that might be included in this district for community costs.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And this is the point where I'm going to remind everybody of our rules, and that is the motion that is on the floor is a continuation motion. So I would ask you to please restrict your comments to whether or not you think it's appropriate to continue this to the next city council meeting. So the motion on the floor is continuation. It is not actually dealing with the different components of the plan itself. It is strictly on the continuation motion, and we'll see how well this goes. Let's go to Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Can I give the reasons why not to continue?
Absolutely, that
Okay.
is certainly appropriate.
Okay. I was one of the people that were opposing on this TIF. I thought there could be affordable housing. I figured on some of the contingencies and some of the necessary and convenient costs, they could be put, or less could be put on it. I know by state law, that's why we have and can do the one parcel of commercial or industrial in a TIF, so I've learned a lot more since last time, and I also thought the developer needed to put the $405,000 and upfront that. And now, when we come back, those are the three things that I was asking. If this developer could do this, then I could probably see way to approving this TIF. If they were giving the citizens of Rapid City something back in culverts, we got to remember, guys, I know one thing. We have no drainage fund.
Okay, Deb, now you're starting to stray this a
Okay,
little
sorry.
bit.
But anyway, long story short, he did the affordable housing. He's doing 8 to 10 lots in the first, or the second phase, and another 8 to 10 in the third phase. If I could ask him the question on, we can't ask him yet?
Can you state your question, then we make the
If
determination?
he's putting, so people know if not to continue it, or why we shouldn't continue it, if he is putting the money up for Jamie Carpenter.
I think that's a little bit of a stretch. I think that we should
Okay.
dispose of the motion on the floor, and that is whether or not to continue the issue. And now if that motion fails, then it would absolutely be appropriate to ask the question if the motion does fail.
Okay.
Alderman Hadcock, you still have the floor.
Okay.
Anything, any additional
Well,
comments?
I guess what I'm trying to say is the developer, I would ask this council not to continue it at this point. This developer has worked with the city council to make a difference on this TIF, to follow the rules by this TIF, and to follow the rules that we have made up at this time. I think after this, I will probably not be convinced on the TIFs with the rules we have made up at this point, but we are halfway in between making rules up for our TIF committee and what the rules are now. To be fair to this developer, I would say not to continue it because of that reason. If we are not going to change the rules, and we have the rules in place now, we need to follow those rules of TIF that we have in place now.
Very good. Thank you. Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I see no reason to continue this. Let's get on with it. I would like to make one comment concerning this, and I'm hoping that in the future that, I mean, he's been through the TIF committee twice. He's been through the planning commission twice. He's been to legal and finance twice. I'm hoping in the future that with our TIF guidelines, our new guidelines coming forward, that they come forward quickly. I hope that they come forward before we face this dilemma again and make a little bit more of an educated decision up front. So
Thank you.
I say get on with it.
Thank you. Alderman Malcolm Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm prepared to vote tonight on this issue, but I could understand why we would want to continue it to give the carpenters some opportunity to come back with some numbers. But I'm a little concerned about the motion. I think the motion was to continue to our next city council meeting, where clearly the carpenter said that Fisk Engineering won't do any work on this until the end of May. So I'm wondering what the motion does for us if we're going to continue it for 2 weeks and they're not going to even start the work to come up with numbers for another 5 or 6 weeks. So I don't know what the motion really gives us, but I'm not opposed to continuing it. My last comment about the continuation is that when we do, if it is continued, at that point in time, I too will be looking to make sure that there is the affordable housing piece to this, that the developer picks up the cost, as well as money for the carpenters on the TIF. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Bob Hurlbut.
Thank you, Mayor. And I too think to the extent we can, we need to accommodate the carpenters. I'd be prepared to move on this tonight, but I also feel like perhaps the issue is slightly reframed now, and knowing that the carpenter property is going to be drawn into the TIF, they may want to have further discussions with staff and or the parties to see that we can get them the best accommodation. So that's why, to me, 2 weeks seems harmless and also an opportunity for the carpenters to try to advance their position into the project plan. And either way, though, I think the accommodations outlined by Mr. Chapman and Ms. Hadcock are important. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Tom Johnson.
I just urge the council to support the motion of continuation here. What we can do in a fairly short order, I believe that, first of all, we're talking community costs and oversizing. I believe that our staff should take a look kind of at what they've got planned as well. We're not really accommodating the carpenters as much as we are the city of Rapid City. We're talking about using this TIF to pay back our costs. So I think that's important to do that. It's a good reason to continue. It's a good reason to involve our staff as well. And if we have to continue after another 2 weeks, I believe it's okay. But all we need here, and I believe the reason why you can do it is kind of a ballpark figure on what those costs are, and I don't even know what elements they're talking about. And I believe we can put a ballpark figure on whatever elements there are and some necessary and convenient costs, and we can approve the plan. And the other thing that this does, even by continuing it, the current developer that has the plan in front of us now knows there is a tax increment district. They can talk to their banker. And I'll tell you from my perspective that I'm going to support the elements that are currently in the plan, so the developer loudly and clearly hears that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Motion on the floor is the substitute motion to continue this item to the city council meeting, is that correct? In 2 weeks. Okay, that's the second substitute motion, correct? First substitute motion. Okay, very good. Got everything correct. Okay. Let's go to Alderman Malcolm Chapman.
I guess at this point we don't take questions from the floor, answers from the floor unless they're asked a question. So I'll just ask Karen Bowman, what?
Thank you, Mr. Chapman.
Karen?
I just wanted clarification on the motion. If it's coming back in 2 weeks, if that is the motion that prevails, and I know Tom mentioned something about visiting with staff about dollars. I think we need a little bit more narrow.
Well, let me do it this way. The motion on the floor is to continue this item to the next city council meeting in 2 weeks. The hope was, and there was no direction in there, that the carpenters would get with staff to see if there's anything that could be included. But that was not part of the motion.
Thank you.
Okay. Everyone clear? Alderman Chapman, you still have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I could support the motion on the floor to give an opportunity for the carpenters to come in and engage in those discussions, but I believe those discussions have been had with staff, not including the carpenters, but I believe those other discussions have been had. I don't know what we're going to gain if the hope is to have the carpenters come back in 2 weeks with some numbers. I don't want this council to be let down in 2 weeks because they won't have numbers in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, I will not be voting to continue this item again in hopes of them getting numbers. I will be pushing this council to vote in 2 weeks.
Thank you. So the substitute motion is to continue this for 2 weeks to the next city council meeting. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We better take a roll call, please.
Johnson.
Aye.
Adcock.
No.
Hurlbut.
Aye.
Hooker.
Aye.
Chapman. Wyffenbach. Olson. Kroger. Quaker.
Aye.
LaCroy.
No.
See, motion passes on a 9-1 vote.
8-2.
8-2 vote. Okay. Very good. Thank you, everyone. With that, we are on to item number 93, please. Deb, could you read in item number 93, please?
93 is to acknowledge report on community movie tour book agreement. So, to acknowledge the report on the community movie tour book agreement.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to acknowledge the community movie tour book agreement. Discussion on that motion. Discussion on that motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? No. Motion passes with 1 no. You got off easy, Kevin. Very good. Item number 94, please.
94 is to authorize mayor and finance office to sign covenant agreement for variance to waive TLC's requirement to provide sewer service, and I move approval.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Discussion on that motion. Discussion on that motion. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Item 95, please, and Alderman LaCroy.
It's a request the Development and Appeals and Review Board to hear the request of Merlin Stoneware to consider an exception to allow access to a high order street, and this is this was located in Lot B, Bar SP subdivision, Rapid City, South Dakota, and make a recommendation to the City Council. The DAR Board's recommendation was for approval, but the applicant has withdrew his associated plot. His request.
So your motion would be to?
A motion be to withdraw the request.
I don't. That's not appropriate motion. Do you have a different motion?
Move to table. Second.
We have a tabling motion and a second. No discussion on tabling motions. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Let's go on to item number 96, please.
Is a resolution to establishing a policy to reimburse the owners of private sewer and water lines, service lines servicing multiple residents for the cost of repairing or replacing such lines. My motion would be to refer this to the Legal Finance Committee.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to refer this to the Legal and Finance Committee. Any discussion on that motion? Now, Durgan, just a reminder for everyone, this is a continuation motion, so we'll be dealing only with the discussion of whether or not why we should continue this. Let's go to Alderman, my order switched on me, Karen Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think there are a lot of unanswered questions in regard to this particular item, and I would support the continuation motion, taking it back to Legal and Finance for further discussion.
Thank you. Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. Unless we're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel on any changes or amendments, I'm not sure what we gain by continuing once again. I'm okay with that if those proposing the continuation have a proposal. I agree that this resolution certainly is not perfect and perhaps needs some work, but it's better than any other proposal that's come forward to date, which is none. So I would just ask that if we're going to continue it, that we have an idea as to why. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Lloyd LaCroix.
Thank you, Mayor. The motion was to take it to legal and finance, and the reason why I made that motion was because Public Works has seen it 2 or 3 times, and we've come back without a recommendation, and I feel the Legal Finance Committee needs to take some time and review it themselves, the other half of the council. That way they have a chance to talk about it, and maybe they can come up with another recommendation, or if they come back with the same, then next council meeting, then we deal with it.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Alderman Deb Hadcock.
Actually, I appreciate people supporting this. I had talked to Robert Ellison for more information. This is something that is very important to our ward and to our community. And if I could have your support on this, we're just going to look at a few more options or what we can do, and that will be put forth before we go to the next city council. And if we could have just a little bit leeway, 2 weeks, or let the legal and finance it. Why that's doing that is I'm going to take a little bit more look at this and some other people to get some more help on this and see what we can come up for a solution. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know in the past that when we direct staff to do things and we're asking for information, we're asking Public Works for what? What do we need to why do we need to continue this? I guess my questions would be when we ask,
Can I answer that?
when we refer to Mr. Alex, our Public Works Director, that we give him specifics, because this thing has been on our table 6-7 months now. I think it's addressed a lot of the issues that we have. So if we're going to refer this or continue it, I'll vote to refer it or continue it, as long as we give specific direction to Robert Ellis or the Public Works and Finance or whoever it is, so they can come back and answer specific questions. Otherwise, if we just say we need more information, we're going to go into this whole go-to loop. I'm gonna, never get anywhere with it. So I would just respectfully request that we give specific, when someone wants to continue, we give a specific direction to our Public Works person to tell them exactly what we want to help further his job. Thank you.
Let's see. Let's go to Alderman Karen Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Included, I think I would like the staff to bring forward the basis for the original 60/40 proposal, which we currently operate under. Is there any science or any engineering involved with this, or is this just a number we pulled out of the hat?
Karen, we're going to reel this in. The motion is actually for continuation, and if we could, there again, I apologize. I know I'm clamping down a little bit tonight, but we do need to try and reel that in. Did you have a specific question? Okay, very good. Alderman, let's see. Let's go to, both have talked. Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
I appreciate Mr. Weifenbach's issues on this, and I guess the specific direction I need in order to make a specific answer for people and to bring a recommendation with working with Robert Ellis is basically his specific direction on private sewer lines and some of that. I think we have got some answers on some of it, but I think we still, on the funding sources and if 60/40, what that would do to how we are working our system now and some of those things. So on the continuance, that's the answers that we are trying to find. And at this point, I think I can do the work on it. I can have some other council members help me on that, and that's why on the continuance, and you know when I say I'll do that with Mr. Ellis, that we can bring back some specific answers. So I appreciate the leeway.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. In terms of the continuation and speaking directly to the continuation motion, I think perhaps one of the reasons why there's been concerns with this resolution and that needs to be addressed at one of the next meetings is it really puts moving targets in the resolution in terms of 40 years, 50 years, 60, 70, 80 years, because it allows, if you look at the map of all of the black dots where there's lines that need to be addressed. Okay,
trying to be creative here so I can get out what I have to say.
Everybody has been trying to be creative tonight.
But the bottom line is, and perhaps, Mayor, if you're willing to do this, to bring forward an alternative resolution or solution that perhaps instead of having squishy targets, so to speak, where where we would instead of having 40 years old and trying to argue about how old a line is, we would simply say lines before 1960 or lines before 1970. That way we don't have someone coming forward and saying, well, the house was actually built in May of 1960, but the lot was actually developed around Thanksgiving of 1959. And I'm serious. I would like to see a perhaps as an alternative solution, instead of instead of 40-60, we look at 60-40, where the city would just pick up 60% instead of 40% and have a bright, clear line on that. It makes it easier for everybody.
And that's why you would support the continuation motion.
As long as that proposal is coming forward. Is that proposal coming forward? Okay, thank you.
Very good. Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
I'll support the continuing motion too, and I'd like to give a little more direction to our Public Works Department, and I would like to understand why there was a decision made and at what time that these private lines existed. We had the conversation about they were built in the character of that era. There wasn't building permits, so I'd just like to know how we decided that. So, thank you.
Let's go to Alderman Bob Hurlbut.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's long overdue that this policy get done, but I think it's also important that we have buy-in, and I get the feeling that's not going to happen tonight. The item I want to see in any revised resolution is also the 10 lot rule is, to me, inflexible and needs to be looked at for options for how to better be flexible there. So if that's part of the recommendation, then I can support the continuation.
Okay. Getting creative in this late hour. That's very good.
Thanks for that.
Yeah. Very good. Any further discussion? The motion on the floor is continuation for 2 weeks, or I'm sorry, to refer this to legal and finance. Any further discussion on the continuation motion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. And I want to thank the council. Everybody is doing a very good job as far as staying on task tonight, and I think I appreciate that, and I think everyone else does too. Thank you so much. Item number 97.
Well 12 status report. Move approval.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Discussion on that motion. Let's see. I am going to go to Karen Gunderson Olson before we go to Robert Ellis. Alderman Olson.
I was just going to say that the report at the committee level was very informative, and I was going to recommend that you all have an opportunity to see it.
Okay.
And Matt's probably, I don't know what Robert has to say.
Let's go to, Robert Ellis, our Public Works Director, no longer acting.
Thank you, Mayor. We do have Greg Warenger here of CTEC Engineering. He's our engineer that we have retained for overseeing the design and construction. Greg has a little presentation, short presentation to update the council on the status of the Well 12.
Okay, I assume is it the pleasure of the council to get the report, I assume. Is there any objection? If not, please proceed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to use the overhead projector and just speed this along with some photos. I think it'll be the quickest way. Might need your help.
Yes, technology makes our life easier, doesn't it?
There we go.
That's cool.
I'm going to talk about Well 12. It's located on Catron Boulevard, about 3 blocks or so east of Sheridan Lake Road. Project's being constructed by Gustafson Builders. It's nearing completion. We had a significant setback in January with the installation of the new well pump, and I'm going to talk about what happened and what's being done to correct it. This photograph here shows the inside of the new pump house, where the cardboard box is sitting on the concrete base in the foreground, is actually the well. 13-inch diameter casing extends a quarter of a mile below the surface.
I think what we're looking for is more of an update versus a history of it. I think if we can just actually get to the update as far as where we're at as far as getting the well online.
That's the pump. Before it was installed, it's presently located not in its design position. It's at the bottom of the well at about the 900-foot level. There was a column pipe separation, a product defect that happened during installation. The weight of the pump unit there caused the column pipe to come apart and fall down to the bottom of the well. It was later determined that pipe threading was defective. The pump manufacturer, Fairbanks Morse, has agreed to replace the pump unit, furnish a new unit, and also to pay for the cost of removal. So the present status is that Fairbanks Morse is the pump supplier. They're manufacturing and furnishing a new well pump, which will be here in the early part of May. We have a contractor that is experienced in retrieving this type of equipment out of the well. He will be mobilizing to the site on Wednesday this week, and he has special tools in place, crane and other machined items that will be able to thread into the existing pump column that's down in the bottom of the hole, grab onto that, and retrieve it with the crane. And we expect that pump to be damaged and not usable. Once the old pump is out of there, the new pump gets here in May, we'll be able to make that installation. And so I think that somewhere around the end of May, we expect this guy to be online. So
okay.
If you need more information, I can do it.
We have a couple of lights on here. Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Well 12 has something to do with Red Rock Reservoir, and I was just going to say we have for council members at 9:30 on Wednesday, we have a tour of Red Rock Reservoir, if we're interested, and it has something to do with Well 12 because Well 12 will be filling up Red Rock Reservoir. So.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Alderman Tom Johnson.
Just thought I'd say, if it's a matter of interest, my son is a machinist and actually did an analysis on this pipe and the collets and determination of how the threads actually came together. And that's exactly right. The material failed. So it really isn't any fault of the contractors, the people that are there. And the good part is we're going to get a new pump at the bottom as well. So while it's taken longer, I don't think that anybody that has been working on this project failed in any way. So, and I know a very good expert that told me that. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Any further discussion? The motion on the floor is to acknowledge the report. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 98, please.
Approved change order number 5 for well 12 in Stony Creek Booster Station to heavy contractors and company doing business as Gustafson Builders Inc. for an increase of $20,562.57. I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Discussion on that motion. Let's go to Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. Two things. I believe that we established this at Public Works, but I just wanted to have it entered into the public record that this change order is not in any way related to the incident that occurred with the pump dropping down into the well, and that it's not related to any reinforcements or anything relating to that issue. So if I could just have an answer to that.
Let's go to Robert Ellis, Public Works Director.
That is correct. The change order that you see before you has no relation to the actual pump dropping to the bottom of the well. These are some doors, hardware, some additional rods, but these are separate from the actual pump issue.
Alderman Quaker, so you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. The other thing is I was hoping that this would be change order number 5 final. I'm getting concerned about all of these change orders, and I know when it got to the second and third change order, I asked if we were getting close to the end, and it was my understanding that there wasn't going to be much more. Now we're at change order number 5 for another $20,000. So I hope we're drawing to a close on what has turned out to be a very, very expensive project, very important, but very expensive, and I'm concerned about all the change orders that keep coming through. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Further discussion. The motion on the floor is for approval. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 99, please.
Item 99 is to reject all bids and authorize staff to re-advertise for bids for Roosevelt Park improvements Phase 3, and a move for approval.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Discussion on that motion. Alderman Tom Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I know I have an interest, and I've heard there's other council people that have an interest. I believe we should reject the bids. I would not encourage the staff to go back and cut a lot out of this project. We deserve a nice park in the Roosevelt Park area, and I think it's incumbent on us to analyze why the bids came in a little higher. I think we had one bidder, but also, if we need to, I think we need to find another funding source to make certain that we actually get the park done as designed. So I'm going to be an advocate of finding the money and to do that park right. My suspicion is if it was Canyon Lake, it would be done right. And I'm telling you that it's Roosevelt Park, and it should be done right. Thank you.
Yep. Very good. Motion on the floor is to approve the motion, which is to reject all bids and authorize the staff to re-advertise for bids of the Roosevelt Park Improvement Phase number 3. Everyone clear on the motion? Additional comments. Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. If I could have clarification, is this a straight re-advertisement, or is there going to be an effort to make some sort of change?
Let's go to Jerry Cole. Mr. Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are going to rearrange the base bid. We had some elements that were in the base bid that are going to be included as alternates this time. We're, if I might, nope.
Okay, Alderman Quaker. Still have the floor, sir. Anything else? Okay. Motion on the floor is to reject all bids and authorize the staff to re-advertise for bids of the Roosevelt Improvements Phase number 3. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 100, please.
Is to approve change order number 4 for the Rushmore Plaza Civic Center Multi-Purpose Edition bid package number 2 to Sampson Construction for an increase of $29,782.50, and I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Let's see, how many people got in the room? We got plenty? Okay, we got everybody. Motion passes with 1 no from Alderman Quaker. Okay. Let's see here. Item number 101, please.
Approve agreement between the City of Rapid City and Ronald Shape for the installation of water transmission main. Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 102, please. Mr. Preston.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 2 bid items on the agenda tonight. The first one, item number 102, is for a digital video recorder system, including monitor, server, antenna, and all necessary components for the police department. We received 3 bids as listed. Staff is recommending that we refer this to Legal and Finance for recommendation.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to send this to Legal and Finance on the 16th. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
April 16th, the Legal and Finance Committee. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 103, please.
Item 103 is the St. Andrew Street reconstruction project. We received 6 bids as listed. Staff is recommending accepting the bid from Shovelhead Excavating Incorporated in an amount of $1,287,862.50.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second to accept the bid from Shovelhead Excavators in the amount of $1,287,862.50.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Discussion on that motion. Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for clarification purposes, I believe this is the 100, 200, and 300 blocks of St. Andrew Street on the east side of
5th, if we could just have clarification.
Let's go to Robert Ellis, Public Works Director. I think you're correct, though. Mr. Ellis.
That is correct.
Okay.
And I'm sorry.
Mr. Quaker,
will it
before.
include Lincoln, or does it not go that far?
Excuse me, I missed that.
Will it include Lincoln, or does it not go that far?
It is a 3-block section. It will go through, I don't know if it includes the intersection of Lincoln or not.
Okay. Alderman Quaker, anything else? Okay, very good. Motion on the floor is for approval. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. We're on to item 103A, and that is an development from Economic Development. And Bob, we know who you are, but if you could identify yourself for the record.
I'm Bob Demersman with Rapid City Economic Development Partnership and Foundation. Thank you for the opportunity to bring you up to speed on some of the things that are happening in economic development. This has been a very important period, a significant period, if you will, in the last 6 months as far as economic development is concerned. It's a benchmark period for us. We've changed our flow and mission somewhat. We've been through a reorganization. We're quite an old organization. We have 4 development corporations within our economic development, and we've looked at some ways of streamlining those, and are still in that process. The incubator in the last 6 months has shown more excitement, more activity than we had ever thought. We have 4 tenants now. We're working with 3. I just got notification from 2 of them this week that it's a deal, that the grant that we've applied for, that they've applied for, is going to come through. It's a DOD funded project, and they will manufacture here as soon as they've completed the process of developing the manufacturing models of these little devices. The incubator is also involved in, or the economic development partnership is involved in several projects that we've applied for funding through the federal government. One is to develop a commercialization. I know that 2012 and the Opportunity Capture Fund has participated in that. We too have applied through EDA and through HUD for monies that will improve the commercialization posture of South Dakota Tech. Dale Skillman has been put in that position. They've completed their offices and have fully equipped those offices. We're now working not only with the Tech Foundation, but also outside the academic world to try to support entrepreneurs within the community. Expansions within Rapid City, I think, are encouraging. We've got, in fact, 2 companies that are just starting up in the industrial park. They've finished their buildings. Maybe you've seen them. TriTech and Phase Technology are both in the park, spin-offs of South Dakota Tech. We have 2 major manufacturers that we're now in the process of platting property for the expansions. One is going to build a new building, and another one's going to expand into another 40,000 square foot building. These are employing machinists, if you will, Alderman Johnson, and mechanical engineers from South Dakota Tech and around. In fact, they've recruited some from East River. He says we're in the happy hunting ground. When we put an ad in, we put it in eastern South Dakota, and we have no problem filling it. So, one of the concerns that we have, and one of the things that we've dedicated a lot of time to recently, is Black Hills Vision. I know the city of Rapid City has money in it. We have money in it. And it's the kind of thing that we've developed a roadmap. We've spent a lot of money on great expertise and great advice. I think it's time that we move forward. Some of the things that we've been working on, the mayor's participated in, kicking off the medical community. They think there's a good deal. In fact, we attended another workshop this weekend, that there's an incredible amount of research being conducted in the Rapid City area, medical research. This was an opportunity to get people from the hospital and the people from South Dakota Tech together to talk about what kind of research they're involved in, and the people from Tech to provide technical support for those things. And it was very encouraging, and I think that's going to move on and gather steam as we proceed. The Tech Corridor, I mentioned briefly some of the things that, if you recall, the Tech Corridor is to develop high-tech economic development-based jobs along the corridor between here and Lead with the Stanford Underground Laboratory. We feel that with the commercialization office that we've supported, with the monies that we put in through the Opportunity Capture Fund, the monies that we've been able to get from the federal government, that this too will be a success. We're looking at 2 or 3 projects that are going to spin off from our incubator that are then going to find places up the creek towards Lee. The regional marketing, I've taken on the task of pulling together our old regional marketing group from other Black Hills communities. I think that everybody's encouraged by that thing. We've looked at a number of possibilities where we're going to dedicate our money, although they're limited. I think if we do it in conjunction with the state, that'll be money well spent. The Rapid Fund has been active. We've made 2 loans in the last 6 months to support manufacturing, and also presented a grant to Black Hills Corp for training. That's basically, we've got a prospect in town right now dealing with agricultural processing, and tomorrow hopefully we can locate him in the not too within the region and within the environs of Rapid City. Any questions? I didn't. I cut it kind of brief, but
Very good. Let's see if there's any questions. Let's go to Alderman Bill Okrepke.
yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for the report,
Yes, sir.
Bob. That's it's really very encouraging to see what's happening and what your offices is bringing to the table, and not only your offices but your groups, the various groups that you're associated with. I think the Black Hills Vision and all the other groups that you're working with are, we're beginning to see stuff, and that's good. The question that I have is that you talk about the incubator and all these startup companies that have come in to get going. How close are you to start spitting some of these out?
The oldest one we have is Evans and Sutherland, which is, and you're familiar with it, Mr. Okrepke. You've seen these people make very high-tech laser projection devices, and they've been in there. It'll be almost been in a year and a half, probably another year and a half. They will be at the point where they're going to have to move out and start manufacturing. They figure that the technology that they've developed for these super duper high density televisions, if you will probably have the commercial and the mass produced version done by this fall. And then they're going to be in a position to start looking at markets and those kinds of things. So to answer your question shortly, probably another 2 years.
Let's go to Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Thanks, Mayor. Bob, I've been going to your meetings for about 2.5 years, and I know Ms. Karen has been there as well a lot. We haven't really been the liaisons, but it's very interesting to go to the meetings just to learn all the things that we're doing with economic development. I just thank you and your team of people that are making a difference with economic development and the things that you guys are doing, because I've been to some really interesting meetings there, which are very, very awesome things that a lot of things that I don't know about, and they're very technical things, and I just appreciate the meetings and the people that are involved in the meetings and the group you have there. So thank you, Mr. Bob Demersman.
Well, we appreciate those comments.
Thank you.
Sincerely. And one other announcement, our next board meeting is going to be held at Respec in the industrial park. And then we're going to have a tour of some of these new manufacturing companies that are getting kicked off. So I hope you could all attend. You're all invited, and I'm sorry I didn't bring the date, but it's the next meeting, and we'll let you know.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Don't see any further lights. This was information only, so thank you. Appreciate it. We will move on to item 103, and in your packet you should see a document that on the top says Department of Health. What we're asking for is the authority for the mayor to sign a grant application, and what it is a grant from the state Department of Health to once again do mosquito spraying, and the grant that we're going to apply for is $39,843.
Move approval.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Item 103, also in your packet, you should also see a document, and it talks about the Western South Dakota Western South Dakota Hydrology Conference. Just bring this to your attention. It's being held in Rapid City. If anyone's interested in attending, this is on April 17th. If you could just let Kay know, we'd be happy to make sure that you get registered. Okay? Then, item 103D. You should also have in your package a statement from the Black Hills Council of Local Governments, just an FYI to the council. They are looking for a new executive director. The executive director is retiring. So that's in there. So if anybody wants to apply. Anyway, there again, if you happen to know a good applicant, please make sure that they're aware that that position is open. There again, that was just informational only. We're on to 103E, which is discussion as far as the downtown, and Alderman Karen Olson.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to draw to your attention this program that is being put together by the newest Leadership Rapid City class, in which they are going to provide weekly entertainment in the downtown from June 12th through August 28th. And I think it's especially interesting to note this logo was created by someone within their organization on a volunteer basis. And the interesting part of it is it has a remarkable similarity to, and I know that this wasn't developed in conjunction with Roger Brooks, but it just shows that a good idea has sort of a universal appeal, because it does look somewhat like Roger Brooks' proposal for the city logo. So I would encourage everyone to share this information. This is going to be one more step in creating a vibrant downtown after 5 o'clock.
Thank
and
you.
applaud the Rapid City Leadership class for taking this project on.
And this was the 2007 class, correct?
Yes.
Very good. Got to make sure you give them credit. Let's, we do have a light on from Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Actually, Karen, I had Kay put that in your box, and Leadership Rapid City is going to come forward with a presentation, and I apologize. I wanted people to know about it, and we are doing trolleys from 5 to 9 with them. Rich Sagan is working that out, and the mayor has agreed, and I appreciate that, Mayor Hanks. Thank you, Karen, for all you do for the revitalization, and I appreciate you bringing this forward. Leadership Rapid City actually is going to come forward on this, so they'll do a presentation for us, but thank you for bringing this forward. You have done a wonderful job in the revitalization as well, and it is one more step. Thank you, Ms. Karen.
Thank you. Seeing no further lights, that was there again an informational item, no action required. That takes us on to item 104. Rod, did you want to go through? And I think we actually have copies. If not, we have copies. Yep. Anybody not have a copy of the updated 2012? Okay, if not, Rod, you're on.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's go through the project updates. There are only a few. If you go to the second page, economic development, we've now included the 2007 expenditures for economic development. You can take a look at those on page 3. You'll now see, and in fact, I think the consultant contract is in front of you today, but we are now in design with Elm Avenue, and this will be reflected. The amount will be reflected the next time we present this. And then also on the next page, page 4, on those completed items, item 23, Hospice House, that is an update. I'm showing it as complete. It is complete. It was just one that was overlooked. So those are the project updates. You'll also see that we have now included in the yellow sections the operation and maintenance. And what I did with this is I took the information that was presented when these applications came in about 3 years ago, and I've tried to interpret some of that information, put it in here. There is information here that needs to be updated. We have sent notices out to the various applicants to try to get updated information on this. So we will continue working on this operation and maintenance section. So, if there's any questions regarding the updates or the new operation and maintenance information,
Okay.
feel free to ask.
Any discussion, any lights? Let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make my question quick. We have a meeting scheduled for the 29th of April for 2012. Are all the people with the projects on here going to update you by then, or are they going to come to the council and update their projects? Or
We have requested that information. It's my understanding that a letter went out from the finance office requesting updated operation and maintenance information. And as far as their attendance at the meeting, I guess I'm not sure. I'd have to refer that to Mr. Preston.
Mr. Preston, did your letter indicate that we're asking for their attendance?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to, that was a recommendation in the draft that I forward to the council president, and that was request included in there that they come prepared to discuss their operation and maintenance.
Very good. Alderman Weifenbach,
Thank
you
you.
still have the floor. Anything else? Okay, let's go to Alderman Tom Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I would also like to have an clear understanding on the timeline of their projects. And it would also be probably helpful to know how they've done in their fundraising efforts as well, if they have a benchmark of fundraising. Thank you.
Very good comment. Very good. Any further discussion? Alderman Malcolm Chapman.
Alderman Weifenbach alluded to the meeting on the 29th. I know Kay sent out a message, an email message, and she's still waiting on return. We have not publicly noticed that meeting because council members haven't said they're available. So if I could just get by a show of hands who would be available for that meeting on the 29th, so I could report that back to Kay. No. This is the 2012, the continuation of the annual 2012 meeting. Thank you.
Ron responded yes. Okay, very good. Two Rons responded yes. Okay. Seeing no further lights, thank you for the update. We're moving on to item number 105. And let's see, I think, Deb, do you read those in? I believe you do.
105?
Yes.
105 is the notice of appeal from requirements of the Rapid City Sign Ordinance, Chapter 1528 by Cabela's Retail Incorporated for wall signs, joint identification sign, and ground monument sign located at 3231 East Mall Drive. Continue to May 5th, City Council at the applicant's request.
We have a motion and a second to continue this item to the May 5th City Council meeting. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Motion on the floor is to continue. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 106, please.
106 is a notice of appeal from the requirements of the Rapid City Sign Ordinance, Chapter 1528 by Rapid Centers LLC for joint identification sign located Rapid City, Pennington County, South Dakota. Continue till May 5th, City Council applicant's request.
We have a motion and a second to also continue this item to the May 5th City Council meeting. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. Have these items both been heard by Sign Code Board of Appeals? Wouldn't this be under their jurisdiction if they haven't already heard it, should they not?
I believe, I'm going to go to Jason Green. I don't think these actually go to the Sign Board of Appeals because it's actually within a PCD, if I'm not mistaken. Let's go to
Actually,
Jason
both
Green.
of these items have been before the Sign Code Board, and they have to be approved by the council as a part of the PCD, as a condition of the PCD. So they're related, but they are separate and distinct, and the Sign Code Board has already exercised its jurisdiction.
Okay.
So the council needs to wait because they have to, because the rest of it needs to be approved first? Is that why?
Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe that the applicant has not finalized their request and as to how they're going to ask the council to overrule the Sign Code Board of Appeals. And I believe that's because they haven't finalized the sign package that goes with the PCD. So they're related, but they are definitely distinct.
So the Sign Code Board, I'm sorry, Mayor.
Go ahead, please.
So the Sign Code Board approved or did not approve of the request?
Okay. What we'll do is one last question, but then the motion on the floor is to continuation. Jason, please.
If I remember correctly, the Sign Code Board of Appeals approved a portion of the request and denied a portion of the request.
Okay.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? The motion on the floor is continue this to the May 5th City Council meeting. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, that takes us to the public hearing items 107 through 147. The chair would look for a motion to open the public hearing on for comments on items 107, 146.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second to open the public comment period. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. At this point, we will take, let's see, The chair will ask if any items 107 through 138, which is our consent calendar, are going to, does anybody wish to have any item pulled? Item 107 to 138. If so, please turn your light. Jason Green.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for clarification, before you get to the consent calendar, there are no speaker request forms for comment?
Nope.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. There again, chair will ask the question, any items 107 through 138 that anyone wishes to pull from the consent calendar? Seeing none, the chair would look for a motion to approve the consent. Yep, we don't close. Chair would look for a motion to approve the consent calendar, items 107 through 138.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of items 107 to 138, which is the consent calendar per the recommendations in the packet. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And that takes us to the end of the consent calendar. Now the chair would look for a motion to close the public comment period.
So moved.
Okay, very good. We have a motion and a second to close the public comment period on items 107 through 146. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We are on to the consent public hearing items, item 139 and 140. Let's see. Does the chair, let's see, the chair is going to ask to, well, to be honest with you, there's no sense in having this consent calendar on two items. Deb, can you just read in item 139, please?
Okay, 139 is Laurel A. Hawkins, RX Billards, 2310 North Maple for a retail off-sale license, malt beverage license. No video lottery, continue till April 21st, City Council.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to continue this next city council meeting. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 140, please.
140 is intent to enter into extended lease of land with Presbyterian Retirement Village of Rapid City Incorporated pursuant to SDCL 912-5.2. I move approval.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Discussion on that motion. Let's see, Jason Green, did you have a comment on this? Let's go to Jason Green, City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You may recall this item was continued from your last meeting. The resolution of intent that had been previously approved had not been published. My understanding is that it has now been published. So I think the appropriate action here is to direct my office to prepare the lease amendment as requested by the applicant.
I think that was the motion, correct? Yep. And that was okay with the seconder. So the motion on the floor is to direct the city attorney's office to go out for advertisement, or to, I'm sorry, prepare what? To prepare the lease agreement. Very good. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We're under the non-consent public hearing items, item 141 through 146. Let's go to 141, and let's see, that would be Mr. Lloyd LaCroix.
Request by Spurlick Consulting Company for James Lettner for a variance to subdivision regulation to waive the requirements to dedicate 10 additional feet of right-of-way along East St. Patrick Street, to waive the requirements to dedicate 17 additional feet of right-of-way along Creek Drive adjacent to proposed Lot 8, to install additional pavement, curb, gutter, sidewalk, street, light conduit along Creek Drive, to install sidewalk along south side of East St. Charles Street, and to provide a planting screen easement along East St. Patrick Street. And this is located at 1624 East St. Patrick Street. And a motion be deny without prejudice at the applicant's request.
Okay, we have motion and second to deny without prejudice at the applicant's request. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. 142, please.
There's a request by Dennis and Janine Walls for a vacation of right-of-way on a portion of West South Street right-of-way adjacent to Lot 1. And this is located at 3401 West South Street. Motion be to approve with corrected legal description.
Second.
We have a motion and second for approval with the amended legal, or the revised legal description. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 143, please.
There's a request by Bolshe Engineering for Stony Creek Development for an amendment to the adopted comprehensive plan to change the land use designation from planned residential development to with 4.8 dwelling units per acre to office commercial with planned commercial development located at 5610, 5624, and 5712 Bent Drive. Move for approval.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 144, please.
It's a request by Davis Engineering Company for Merlin Stonework for a variance to the subdivision regulations to waive the requirements to install curb, gutter, sidewalk, street light conduit, water, sewer, pavement as per chapter 16.16 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. This is located at northeast corner of the intersection of South Dakota Highway 44 Airport Road. Move to deny without prejudice at the applicant's request.
We have a motion and a second to approve or to deny with prejudice at the applicant's request. Any
Without.
discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 145, please.
A request by Britain Engineering and Land Surveying, Inc. for Ralph and Silva Wahida for her variance of subdivision regulations to waive the requirements to dedicate additional right-of-way and install pavement, curb, gutter, sidewalk, street light conduit, water, and sewer as per chapter 16.60 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, and this is located 8710 Highland Hill Road. And motion be deny without prejudice at the applicant's request.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to deny without prejudice the applicant's request. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 146, please.
146 is the second reading of ordinance number 5375, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning the within described property as requested by Bosch Engineering for Stony Creek Development for a rezoning from low-density residential district to office commercial district located at 5610, 5624, and 5612 Bent Drive, and I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Alderman Karen Olson.
Does that then include the associated amendment? The motion?
Let's go to Bob Dominic, Growth Management.
I move approval. Yeah.
So this motion would then include that? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I don't.
I'm in support of the motion.
Okay. Yeah, the only motion on the floor is for approval, and that is head in conjunction with, but we've already approved that prior to on the agenda.
Right,
So,
earlier we did
right.
that.
So the motion is strictly for approval. Everyone clear on that? Motion for approval. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We're on to item 147, the bill list. Mr. Preston.
Thank you, Mayor.
This is boring.
On your electronic agenda, the council has a bill list that totals $6,782,413.01. There are no changes or additions.
Okay, the chair will look for a motion for approval of the bill list. We have a motion and a second to approve the bill list, which totals $6,782,413.01. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Let's go to Jason Green, City Attorney. Do we have anything for executive session?
We do, and I'd appreciate it if the motion maker would include that the purposes for those allowed by SDCL 1-25-2.
Yes, sir, Jason.
We have a motion and a second to go into executive session as permitted by SDCL 1-25-2. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We are in executive session.
Dash 43.4 with the light on.
Executive session. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We're out of executive session. Chair, look for motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Good job. Not a problem. You weren't in there long. You weren't in there long.